Hey everyone, welcome to the Game of the Year Awards for Sifted Games at SIFTD.net. We're about to count down the very best and the very brightest from 2020 from just about every platform. We have 24 categories in this year's awards, although we have done a little bit of shuffling. There are actually 3 categories that are not going to appear in this year's awards because there just really weren't any games in those genres. It's really kind of crazy. But fighting games, driving games, and sports games. We do not have those categories this year. But like I said, we still have 24. So we have a lot of exciting categories for this generation, but we also have at the very end our Generation Awards, where we will crown the game of the generation and the platform of the generation. So this year, the award show doesn't actually culminate with our game of the year. We have bigger stuff after we crown our game of the year. Just a couple logistics we want to get into. Maybe you haven't watched our game of the year awards before. We do not look at this like we are the authority. When we did our game of the year awards at Game Trailers and we had like 10 to 12 people working on them, we felt a little more confident that we could reach a consensus and probably come up with a pick that probably for most people, they would be like, okay, I get it. This is Matt and I. These are the games that we like. The other part about it is that we may not have played some games. So there may be a category where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Shane picked that game for that category. I may not have played it. And it may be the same case for Matt. In a lot of cases, when we go through these categories, we will bring that up. Like I will say, I know one category in particular where my winner probably shouldn't be the winner, but I did not play what should be the winner. So just wanted to put that out ahead of things before we start getting into all the categories. And again, we have 24 and we don't have time to waste. So we're going to get straight into it. We're going to kick things off with best first person shooter. Another thing I should say is for most categories, Matt and I just have one winner apiece. When we start getting to some of the more interesting categories, then Matt and I will have a runner-up and a winner. But for these first kind of genre awards, generally just pick one. So Matt, what is your winner for best first person shooter? And actually, we can say this one together. It is Doom Eternal. Yeah, and
I don't know how in sync that was.
It doesn't work as well as when we're in the studio together. This is what I was talking about earlier. I'm like, it's just weird trying to play off Matt when there's a delay. Now, this is actually another category where I feel like there might be a better option that I didn't play. And I think that game is Half-Life Alyx. Like, I think that might actually be the best first-person shooter of 2020. I don't have a VR helmet that I can play Half-Life Alyx on. I didn't get to play it. So of all the first-person shooters I played this year, Doom Eternal was the best of the bunch. And Matt, did you play any other shooters this year, or is this just like your one game that you did pick?
This is it. This is the only first-person shooter.
So this was your default choice. Well, you chose wisely. Yeah. It did end up being like the best shooter of the year. Campaign in the game, really well balanced, really intense. After playing bouts of this game, I felt like I needed to take a shower sometimes. It's just one of those games that's just relentless and it never lets up. There really aren't any peaks and valleys in this game. That may be one thing that may turn people off to the game. But it's Doom. Like, do people expect a valley in a Doom game? I would say this, though. I think there are more quiet moments in this than there were in the reboot from 2016, which I think was really just relentless. But some of the new gameplay mechanics and tweaks that they added to this, I don't think I really understood or appreciated those until I saw someone else play the game. If you watch somebody play this game who is good at this game, that I think may make you appreciate it more than actually playing it yourself. The tools in this game and the traversal options, like what they do in this game, good players, I didn't even know was possible. Like some of them never touch the ground. Like they just fly around the map. So it takes a great shooter with really solid, reliable mechanics to be able to provide those kind of gameplay opportunities. And this game does it. And on a base level, as someone who just played it on the ground, like a normal human being, I loved it. I had a lot of fun with it, but I will say this, I could only play it in short bursts. It was hard for me to sit down and play like a 6 hour chunk of this in a row. But I loved every minute that I played it when I was ready to kind of re-engage with it. So just polished, really slick, runs like a beast. Some of the stuff that they've been doing outside of the campaign, really interesting and fun. I feel like the polish in this game and the cinematics was even better than what was in the 2016 version. I think it tells a better story. I think in pretty much every way, it's better than the 2016 reboot. So best first-person shooter. And also, I mean, if you just look, there weren't a lot of great shooters. Most of the shooters that were good this year were also RPGs. So it's a little tough to find other nominees. You know, there just weren't that many good ones. I think probably Half-Life Alyx deserves the award more than Doom Eternal, but I didn't play it. I tend to favor innovation. And so I think if what people say about Half-Life Alyx is true as far as its quality level, if it is indeed that good, I probably would have picked it because it's way more innovative. But as far as what I played this year, I can't give an award to something I didn't play, which is why I spent this entire weekend playing a bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, because I don't have an expensive VR HMD, this was not a game that I had an opportunity to play. So there you go. Doom Eternal, best first-person shooter of 2020. Next up, a category that sometimes goes hand in hand with best first-person shooter, and that is best multiplayer game. Now, this casts a wide net. Multiplayer in 2020 especially comes in so many different flavors now, Matt. Like, it's pretty crazy how many different ways you can play with or against other people now. And again, like we were talking about in episode 241 of Game Face, Left 4 Dead kind of inspired that whole asymmetrical, kind of cooperative, kind of competitive thing. And we're seeing that just blossom throughout the industry. We just saw it at the Game Awards with The Evil Dead, the game, and Scavengers, and so many other games that we saw at the Game Awards. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, holy crap, that genre is really exploding. So anyway, multiplayer can come in so many different forms. If you look at games like Overcooked, where you're cooperative cooking stuff, like it's just really exploded multiplayer gaming in the last like 3 or 4 years, at least in my opinion, I think it has. So this is becoming, for me, more difficult year after year because there's other things that you're considering now. And so with that in mind, Matt, what is your favorite multiplayer game of 2020?
Well, it was the only multiplayer game I played for any real length of time, which was Star Wars Squadrons.
Wow.
Which, again, I did not actually play very long.
I'm not saying wow at Squadrons, by the way. I'm saying wow that it was like the only multiplayer game you played all year.
I mean, and this might just be me getting older, although it's always been more or less true outside of fighting games. I could not possibly care less whether I'm better or worse at a video game than someone else.
But you do in some genres, though. Like with fighting games, you can.
I just said with the exception of fighting games.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry.
But I just don't care. I don't have any competitive spirit really in terms of anything outside of fighting games for the most part.
That's what it takes. You're right.
I don't care. Like, it's not important to me. Like you have no
esports dreams or delusions.
No, my competition circuits are centered on other things.
Yeah.
I mean, if fighting games, yeah. If you want to come at me on a fighting game thing, I'll end you. I'll go in a training mode for a week to like come back the next week and be like, okay, you want to go? We'll do that. Yep. But outside of fighting games, I really don't have that. Multiplayer on Squadrons, though, I've been wanting to play a modern multiplayer version of X-Wing versus TIE Fighter for 20 years, yep. And they more or less delivered on it. I don't agree with some of the weird kind of arcadey touches they threw in this thing, like the drifting and stuff like that. I think damages the sort of purity.
Yeah, it actually hurt it more than it helped it. Yeah. It became a bug.
Yeah. But like overall, as a realization of like X-Wings and TIE fighters blowing each other out of the sky, like they pretty much nailed it on a base level. They just put out a new patch that tweaked a bunch of stuff that helped a lot. They put B-Wings and TIE Defenders in the game, which is the real thing I wanted them to do. I didn't think we'd get, but we did get it. So they did a good job. They've done a good job supporting it, which is something I don't think was a guarantee when this thing came out. Like there was a really good chance that was just going to be a release and EA was going to let it fly and that was going to be the end of it. But I guess it sold well enough to warrant a little extra work. So that's cool. It's nice to see a multiplayer Star Wars thing that isn't just like, let's make Battlefield again.
And they haven't given up on it like you feared, Matt. You were afraid that like they'd bail on it and like the updates wouldn't come, but they haven't. They've stuck with it, which is really good. I think it bodes well for maybe the possibility of getting because this is clearly not a full-fledged game. Of course.
There's a mode for Battlefront 2 that basically got broken off into its own release,
and it was a budget release too. So.
Yeah, you can tell, like you can tell in places, like certainly presentationally in terms of like the non-gameplay areas.
Yeah,
but I think it bodes well for maybe we'll get a full-fledged game, especially with Patty Jenkins doing a Rogue Squadron movie in 2023.
Which is not related to the games.
No, not related. Well, Rogue Squadron is a bigger thing in the Star Wars universe than just those games. Although I think that might finally get us that trilogy remaster.
That's true.
For Rogue Squadron.
It may. I mean, they're going to strike while the iron's hot. That's for sure.
From what I can tell, Rogue Squadron, the movie takes place after Episode 9. Which will be interesting because I didn't expect them to ever continue the timeline past that, especially because it requires you to acknowledge the events of Episode 9 happened.
Right.
But the logo is a sequel era X-wing. So I think that's what they're going to do, and so I'm holding out hope that this is kind of a blueprint for something in the future that would be more robust. Because right now it's basically just like they added deathmatch, which is which is cool because you didn't have like a simple mode to play, like you don't always want to play the 15-20 minute long fleet battle mode, like it's just a long thing, and the kind of the objective based standard mode, like ranked mode, like just it's fine, but no one plays it like that. Like, you always win or lose based on how many people score points by shooting each other down. Like
it's just like Call of Duty. It's the same thing. They put all these modes in it, and in the end of the day, people just kill each other, and that's who decides. Just give us, and just give everyone just give us a mode where we just 5 versus 5, we go in and blow each other up until the time runs out, and like that's what they finally did, and it's there and it's good and it's better. It's actually a little more pure than because sometimes you just want to fly around and shoot stuff. Yeah.
And I think that is a nice thing they finally gave us. So the initial impression plus the longevity of the support they've given it, I think that puts it over the top for me. Also, I really didn't play much else new in terms of multiplayer. Mostly I was playing online fighting games, and that was about it. And like the occasional Jackbox stuff before the world ended, but that was about it.
Okay. My winner for best multiplayer game is Fall Guys. Come on, people, you knew it. I'm a big platformer guy. It's online. It's Battle Royale. Probably there's a couple games that have been like pleasant surprises, but definitely one of the biggest surprises of the year was Fall Guys. I think Among Us is maybe the bigger surprise because the game was like 2 years old and people suddenly discovered it. But Fall Guys, it's a 3D platformer battle royale. And I have found that this game has, well, I wouldn't even say it replaced it because I still play it, but it's very much in the same vein for me as like Rocket League. It's one of those games, the matches are really short and I can jump on it real quick and play a couple matches and jump off. What I found myself doing is playing Fall Guys whenever I'm downloading something else. It doesn't need a lot of bandwidth, so I don't really have lag problems when I'm doing that with Fall Guys. It's taking in so little information that it's really hard for lag to affect it. Lag does suck when you're trying to jump a gap. I'll say that. But I think they did a really good job with the netcode in that. And I would say they did the same thing with Rocket League as well.
Also like Rocket League in that you got it free from PSN.
Yeah, it also is very similar in that vein.
That seems to be a good way to really start a phenomenon.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we still talk about Resogun like 7 years later because it was given away free at launch. So I have had a lot of fun with Fall Guys. I think that they were caught off guard by its success.
Definitely.
And hadn't planned to roll out content as fast as they have been forced to. Yet they have continued to roll out content constantly. So I don't know for sure if it was a part of the plan all along. I think it probably wasn't, but the studio has picked it up and they are, like I said earlier, striking while the iron is hot and keeping people engaged in Fall Guys. So definitely, without a doubt, one of the biggest surprises of 2020. And for me, the best multiplayer game of the year as well. Next up, best adventure game. And I think people always get these confused. Like if you look at like best adventure in some other Game of the Year awards, even the Game Awards, they're kind of loosey-goosey. You'll see like action games in their adventure category.
Well, it depends what you want to call it, because like there's like adventure games which are like Myst. Like that's kind of like
point and click style,
or like kind of the story-driven Telltale thing, which I think
is the cursor on the screen.
But I think what you and I think of as adventure games, but then there's another whole more console-centric group of people that like because when Zelda first came out, it was called an adventure game.
Yeah,
like that's what they billed it as, was an adventure game.
Yeah,
and so there are people who consider sort of basically like an Assassin's Creed to be an adventure, like what we would probably call an action adventure or maybe an action RPG. Like they think of as an adventure game because of like set character going through world with story is sort of what an adventure game is to them. It's one of those things that like it varies by outlet almost sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And it does. I mean, it's varying for us. And our definition of the adventure game is the traditional point and click adventure game, or things like walking simulators. Generally games that have no action and have a lot of puzzles.
Not a lot of twitch to them, really.
Yeah, doesn't really require reflexes. It's more of a thinking game.
Yeah, and I will admit that one of the most time-consuming process of the Game of the Year awards every year here is looking through SIFTD to make sure that the things I'm picking for each genre are things that you agree are in that genre.
Oh, right, in the genre, yeah. It gets complicated because IGN will say this game is in this genre, and then we'll say it's in this one. And what I thought you were getting at was one of the hardest things every year is picking the best adventure game, because it has become the hardest. That
is also true. It's for a category that would have had no entries 10 years ago.
Yeah,
like pre-Walking Dead.
There are
for
tons
Telltale,
of them.
It would have been, there was nothing. Like this was a dead genre for 15 years, pretty much.
And now it's like
all of a sudden it's everything.
Yeah, I mean, there were big games this year. There was plenty of them, and from like big publishers too. But Matt, what's your winner? This,
by the way, is one of the things I meant when I said if indie people want to make the stuff that the AAA people aren't delivering, adventure games are absolutely one of those. And like you just said, the AAA companies have picked up on it and are doing it themselves now.
Yeah.
But this is another genre that I think indie games brought back from the dead.
Yep, absolutely.
And speaking of the dead, my pick for the best adventure game is Spiritfarer.
Yeah, a game you talked about, was it 3 episodes ago? 4?
A couple of, I bring it up every once in a while. This is a game although to tie in AAA, I would probably never have known about this game or played it without Game Pass.
Right.
Because Game Pass just threw it up on here's a new thing that came out on Game Pass. And I'm like, all right, I'll try that. I like how that looks. I know this company. And it's great. Like it's even like almost a hard thing to slot into adventure game, because there's some platforming in it and there's some RPG in it, and
it's really a mashup.
There's a lot of different things. Some people would call it a sim. Like I have people who I recommended it to, and like, oh, this is a building sim. This is like a building, and they're not wrong. Like you are doing that.
It has that stuff in it. Yeah.
And like, it's a very, you can just look at it here. It's a very charming and appealing look to it. And it's got a lot of heart. Like you basically play the new Grim Reaper. You play the new Charon, actually, the fairy person of the dead. And instead of being a giant skeleton in a hood, like you just saw him giving over the job to you, now you're a perky girl with a beautiful cat. And you have a new boat. It's not a sad canoe. It's a big houseboat, and you build houses for all the dead souls that show up in the form of animals, and you have to help solve their problems. And it's a very emotion-driven and very heartfelt game that has a lot of charm to it, and will probably make most people cry. I think it is a game that has a dedicated.
I didn't realize that.
It has a dedicated hug button. For you to hug the other people before they go on to their afterlife and stuff. Like you bond with a lot of these characters, but the point of succeeding is to solve the problems they didn't solve in life, so they can move on to the next stage of the afterlife. So a lot of this game is saying goodbye to there. You see the hug button in action.
Yep.
A lot of this is saying goodbye to these characters you've grown attached to. And then like, because of that, your home base, your ship changes because they are no longer living on the ship. It's a game about transition and letting go in a lot of ways. And it's fascinating that they get to do that. And in the meantime, like, here's this map.
We could all use that right now.
Yeah, and you can plot the courses and you sail on, and you can fish off the back of the B-roll's just lining up here. You can fish off the back of the ship. Like there's a ton of stuff to do. There's a great feeling of ownership over the ship and over like kind of where you're going in the world and what you're doing. And then you can do some platforming and like you get a lot of crafting and like upgrading things. Like there's a constant, if filling up bars and exploring stuff and constantly like, upgrading your home base is something you love. And I've said many times, if you want to make me invested in a game, give me a castle to build, Suikoden style. Then it really sucked me in, and I would probably go back and pay for this game. Even though I got it for free from Game Pass,
I would give them some cash.
Yeah, I would support this game by paying for it. I would.
Awesome.
So if you don't have Game Pass, I would say this is a goodbye already. if this kind of thing appeals to you.
$1 for 3 months, done
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much other good stuff on there as well.
Yeah, so this is it's really stuck in my head for such a small kind of little out of nowhere game that isn't really a mainstream talked about thing. Like I have gone back to this repeatedly, and I have just thought about it repeatedly. And when I looked at the adventure category, I was like, well, it's this, but I'm going to go look through the other stuff that was released this year to make sure there's nothing else that I forgot about. I was like, no, this is a pretty easy pick for me, in all honesty, which is not common.
Okay, I also made my pick in this genre for essentially the same reason, in that it was the one that kept coming back to me. This is also the genre that I spent a lot of time with over the last weekend, going back and playing stuff that I hadn't played. So I played a good bit of Twin Mirror. I played a good bit of Tell Me Why, and I think that was it.
Those are the two big ones. Those are the two 800-pound gorillas of the adventure 2020
because they're from
genre.
The big developers. One of them is from Bandai Namco. And the game that kept coming back to me over and over was Bug Snacks. Bug Snacks is my adventure game of the year for 2020. I'll be honest with you, Twin Mirror felt almost exactly like the other game. Like they were just, they're like these murder mysteries where you're trying to figure out who done it. And I feel like that's like what all of them have become. Like Life is Strange, or these mysteries. And
they're following the Don't Nod template.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I like that stuff. But Bug Snacks is just totally whacked. It's so insane. Like everything about it is just so bizarre. And look, at my point in life, with all the media I've consumed, and in all honesty, a lot of the stuff I just like, for me to call something weird, it's weird. And this game is weird in a good and unsettling way. I also just like the mechanics. It doesn't play like anything else. It's particularly in this genre, but it doesn't play like anything else, period. I wouldn't say I fell in love with this game, but I did not think I was going to continue playing it after I put it down for the first time. And then when I went back to give it one last chance, I stuck with it. So it was free on PlayStation Network for a lot of you last month. So hopefully some of you guys have played it, or you're just holding it until you get your PS5 or whatever. But the thing, actually, you couldn't claim it unless you had a PS5. There was some kind of a weird snafu there or something.
Yeah, I think you could do it through the website, but you couldn't do it through like a PS4.
Right. You couldn't claim the PS5 version with the PS4, but if you went through their website, you could get it. Right. So anyway, Bug Snacks was a pleasant surprise for me this year. I was kind of drawn to it just because it looked so weird. I was like, I got to at least give it a chance. And then it actually ended up being a really fun, really engaging, and really interesting game to play. So for me, Bug Snacks is my adventure game for 2020.
I was, as an avowed Bug Snacks hater in the run up to this game, I actually did like it a lot more than I expected to.
Okay.
And I also I haven't finished it, but I was not ready for the interpersonal drama of this game. Like the characters and their relationships to each other are really well done. Matter. That's what I was shocked by. Was like,
a lot of people probably did what I did at first and just played through the first couple hours. Or like, this is kind of cool, but it's kind of weird.
No, like there's some real shit in this game.
It changes,
like narratively, it's not fucking around. Like it's for something that I thought was just like a dumb kind of Pokemon grab thing. There's heart in it, and there's some real ideas,
some surprises too, I would add. And
I so as much as I have not really gone back to it a whole lot because there's been a lot to play since the PlayStation 5 came out, obviously. I'm actually going to call Bug Snacks one of the most underrated games of the year. Like I think people are sleeping on the Bug Snacks here. Give it a shot.
We can't have that, Kyle.
Give it a shot. And this is me talking. I've been ripping on this game for like a year and a half. But playing it, but getting my hands on it really changed my mind.
It's better than you think, for sure. Yeah. Next up, what usually is like the biggest category as far as genres are concerned for our game of the year every year. It has become kind of the de facto genre of the big budget game. But for whatever reason, and Matt alluded to this earlier, there were no RPGs this year. Like none. I'm sure you saw the Game Awards. You saw the nominees at the Game Awards. And you're like, wait a minute. Like those are the best RPGs from 2020. So there were slim pickings this year. But Matt, what was your choice?
My choice was, one of the only choices, really. And it was Hades.
Yep.
And if you told me at the beginning of this year that my favorite RPG of the year would be a roguelike from the people who made Bastion, I would have been like, really? Like,
or it would just be Hades, because Hades has been available since
been around. Yeah.
It's a 2-year-old game that just now got its final release and has managed to catch fire on its final 1.0 launch.
Because what they've done with it, certainly not just the 1.0 update, but the updates leading up to it, they really expanded and improved and added systems and added ideas and added characters and added reasons to play, really. And that goes down to the end game too. And it's I don't like roguelikes generally. I don't like kind of the repetitive do things over and over and over again, just like throw yourself at the wall until you get past the wall thing, which I know is weird for someone who likes Dark Souls to say. But usually I find in a roguelike situation, because one of the things I like about Dark Souls is you can learn the terrain. Yep. You can and roguelikes have always frustrated me because they're randomized. So I'm like, well, I'm never going to learn. I just get through this, randomized stuff.
It's a double-edged sword.
Sometimes it's just really frustrating. Sometimes it's really frustrating. It's like you hit things like,
sucks.
Sometimes you hit things, especially in roguelikes, where it's like, oh, well, you're just not going to survive this. Yeah. Sorry. That is not true in Hades. Hades does a really good job of letting you get powerful on every run with things that you then lose when you have to do the next run. And the other thing that I think they do really well is they incorporate the repetition and the dying and the trying it over and over again into the narrative. Like the characters make commentary on how you died last time. I have no idea how they recorded this many lines about very specific situations that I found myself in. I'm like, how did you know that was going to happen? Like they know
worked on this game for a long time.
And they know their game inside and out. And I bet a lot of those lines were recorded because of the data they were getting from early access players and how they learned how it got played and how the play turned out, and they were able to address that in a way that made it feel really organic and really interactive in a way that other roguelikes just don't. And on top of that, you have really great writing. I mean, Supergiant has always had great writing, even in the games
from GameSpot.
Yeah, even the games that I haven't enjoyed of theirs, the writing's still great. The voice acting's still great. This is the best voice acting they've ever done, and that's saying something. And it's also every line in this game is voiced, unlike the previous games they've done. They usually and
the voice acting is really good.
Oh yeah, it's great. Every character in this game is a voice acting performance that knocks it out of the park, and every one of them is memorable, even if they only say a few lines every time you go back to the hub world at Hades' palace, and and they get all the mythology right, and you can tell the twists and spins on the various mythological characters make mythological sense, but they're also modern interpretations of them. The art style is fantastic. The animation looks amazing. It looks
so good. Yeah,
it pulls you in, and it doesn't let you go. And I hope we get PlayStation and Xbox versions of this soon, because right now it's only PC and Switch.
Yep.
If you have either of those, you should be playing this now. It also, you can share saves on it. I don't know if that's in place now or if that's coming, but you are going to be able to cross save between all platforms. Which is great.
When you say share save, that doesn't mean you can give it to your friend and he can use
it means you can share saves between your platforms.
On platforms, yeah.
Yeah, and so, which is good, because this is not a game you want to start over on.
Here's something else I would say, Matt. You might want to hold off on any more discussion on Hades, because I have a feeling we might talk about it again a couple times.
It's possible.
I think you made your case, though. Yeah. For sure. My pick for best RPG, and first of all, Matt's pick is amazing. And what I like about Hades is that it does it innovates that subgenre of the RPG. But why I chose the game that I selected over Hades is because of what you're seeing on the screen right now, role-playing. And my winner for best RPG of 2020, and this might bring down the house, is Cyberpunk 2077. I feel like it is the best role-playing game of 2020. I have been completely sucked into that world. I feel like I'm living in 2077 in some crazy city. It sells everything about the setting, from the characters to the costuming to all of it, to the RPG elements that we were talking about in Game Phase 241, about how amazing they are and how you really feel even the slightest improvements and changes to your character. And that to me is why I love Hades. And I think it is absolutely a Game of the Year contender. But that's why I had problems giving it best RPG, because to me, the best parts of it aren't necessarily what I personally connect with the role-playing genre. But I will say this, it is very clever how they have worked the RPG elements into Hades. And there is some innovation going on there for sure that probably isn't happening in Cyberpunk. But to me, the actual RPG elements of Cyberpunk are vastly superior to what I was getting in Hades. And I just love the characters and the plot. But you're right. I mean, they really fleshed that stuff out for Hades too, which is a surprise for an indie game on a small budget. But just overall, the story...
Especially a surprise for a roguelike.
Yeah, for sure. Something
that usually generated. Is not a strength.
It's not curated. You're not pre-building everything beforehand. But I think this is kind of a tale of kind of two different approaches to the genre. And I feel like the approach that Cyberpunk took was, to me, for what I like, more successful than the approach that Hades took. So a tough call for sure. And Hades was absolutely my runner-up. But I ended up giving it to Cyberpunk 2077. Again, in a really bad year for RPGs.
Yeah, it's been if you disqualified Hades, I don't know if there would be anything for me to pick but Cyberpunk.
Right. Yeah, I mean, honestly, there isn't. Let's just be honest. It was one or the other. And it took me a while to figure it out, but that's how I settled on Cyberpunk. Next up, the reason I goaded Matt to maybe wrap up his discussion about Hades for best RPG is because we're now at the best indie game. And for both of us, the winner is Hades. And I don't think this was even close. Like, indie game, again, is usually a category that's so hard. Because for one, I'll be honest, Matt, at the end of the year, it's hard for me to even remember all the indie games I've played because a lot of them I don't finish. I'll play for a couple hours until I get the concept. And then once they start working the concept over and over, I'll bail. And so at the end of the year, I actually have to start going through rundowns of Game Face and looking at my notes, trying to figure out exactly which indies I played. But
also because they're all so different that you can't really think of one category and think of all the things you played of a certain type. And
it's really not fair, to be honest with you. But people care so little about indie games that we kind of just have to have this one category. But I hear you, man. It's really not fair to the people who make these games to just jam all their stuff into one category. But I do feel like this year, Hades was just heads and shoulders above anything else.
If we wanted to do a runner-up in this category, that would be a tough fight.
Yeah, but I'm glad we didn't.
Yeah, but Hades is just done. there's not anything else Hades level this year in terms of the indie world. It's this.
Yeah, and it is crazy. I mean, it is a little weird, I must admit, to be considering a game that technically was released in 2018 for a bunch of awards in 2020. I ultimately decided it was okay because it was its final release. And once I decided it was okay, I also decided that I was not going to let that impact it at all. Meaning that if I was ever comparing Hades to something else, I was never going to use that as an excuse for Hades not to win once I decided that that's how I was going to handle it.
And I also think it helps that it's a very different game now than it was when it is. A lot of early
recognize it.
Yeah, a lot of early access games just sort of when they hit final, it's just a less buggy version.
There's no bugs now.
Yeah, it's we fix all the bugs. But this is a very different game than what they started with. They really remolded this and added to it in using user feedback and it became something very special as a result. So I think the game that resulted in 2020 is a separate thing. It's fair to call it a separate thing from what people were playing in early access for 2 years. Yep. And I didn't play it in early. I did have it in early access, but I played it when it first went up, and then I'm like, well, this is a neat idea. It's really rough. I'm going to wait, and I never went back to it again until it hit 1.0. This year, and I came back and I was like, "Whoa, wow! Where did all this come from?"
People that actually stayed in early access did all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, they did a lot of work for me right there.
That's how it's supposed to work. So anyway, there you go. Indie Game of the Year, Hades. I would really be surprised if other publications come up with anything else. To me, it was clearly the best indie game that was released this year, if you're going to consider it for the awards in the first place. Next up, best VR game. It was a good year for VR, Matt. Maybe the best year yet for VR. Yeah. But I think it wasn't a quantity question. It was a quality question. To me, this was a year where developers really hit their stride with VR games. And you are seeing it not in just improving how the games play or helping with motion sickness, but also how they look. Like VR games really, to me, took a huge step up in visual fidelity in 2020. Like it used to be, I would watch trailers for VR games and I'd be like, VR game, you could just tell it was like low poly, low res textures. You weren't seeing a lot of stuff like bump mapping and things like that. Not anymore, man. Some of these VR games look just as good as the big budget AAA games. Now, here is another category, unfortunately, though, where I probably can't give it to the game that should win. I can only give it to the game that I played. And I literally played one VR game this entire year. The other thing is that this is another category where Matt and I have the same winner, and that is Star Wars Squadrons. Yep. It's the only VR game I played in 2020.
That's probably a Half-Life Alyx. As you know, but I didn't play that either.
I mean, the best VR, let's be honest, the best VR game of 2020 is Half-Life Alyx. I don't think there's any debating that. Like, I can't give it to it because I haven't played it, just on principle. But I would venture to guess with about 99.5% certainty that if I were able to play Half-Life Alyx, I would feel that it was superior to Star Wars Squadrons just for the VR part of it anyway.
I don't know that I would necessarily.
You don't like shooters, yeah.
I don't like shooters as much. I'm not a Half-Life fan, so to speak, and I am a Star Wars fan. And I already knew my reaction to the Rogue One VR X-Wing mission from Battlefront 1 on PS4. And that was like, I want a whole game of this. And that is basically what they gave me here. I would even argue, because I think the campaign in this is a little by rote in terms of narrative, I would argue that this game should be played in VR if you can at all pull it off.
Oh, it's superior. It still may be a little crazy.
It is the better way to play the game is in VR.
It is. It's amazing. As long as I lasted, I was like blown away. But it didn't take long until I started feeling a little off. I'll say this, though. I lasted longer than usual. And then when I did get sick, it didn't last as long. So
right. And I only played two new VR games this year. The other one being Iron Man. And that obviously was not going to be the best anything.
Yeah.
I guess it's the best Iron Man VR game I played this year.
I'll say this. All my friends are buying VR this Christmas. All of them. All my casual friends in Philadelphia, they just, on our text thread that we've had running for years and years, every one of them is buying a Quest. So it's exactly. So I have a feeling 2020 might finally be the turning point for VR, where it at least touches a little bit of the mainstream.
Gets a little bit out. I mean,
before this, it was just mobile stuff. It's like, I can buy it for $50 or whatever.
The easy slap it on your face wireless stuff is the key.
It was the only thing that was working.
It has to be quick to set. It has to be as fast to impulsively start playing it as like PlayStation is. Like that's the thing. That's what it has to be.
So there you go. Best VR game. And I'll be honest with you, the next two categories, Matt and I also agree. I'll say this. This has been the easiest awards I've maybe ever selected. One, because I'm not in a room with other people that I have to discuss it with. But two, because it was just, to me, very clear cut. There were just some games that just really stood out above the others. It made it, to me, very easy. This is the least amount of time I've spent picking my Game of the Year awards, maybe ever.
Yeah, that's about right. It's also, I haven't compared anything, but this might be the year we've agreed on the most categories.
Oh, without a doubt, Matt. It's not even close. I mean, without a doubt. We agree on a ton. And it'll also help make sure that the show doesn't run over time, which is great. So next category is Best Action Adventure. And once again, Matt and I have the same winner, and it is The Last of Us Part 2. You'll be hearing about that game a couple more times here before the show's over.
And probably in a few other Game of the Year rundowns.
And probably in a few other Game of the Year features that you're going to read or watch. I don't even know that we can talk about it now or we can talk about it later, Matt. But this game, it's just, I think I'll say for this part, the best action adventure, to talk true to the category, it was truly a blend of those two things. The adventuring part of it, the discovery, the conversations, and then the action part, just a totally brutal, violent, grueling combat. It was the embodiment of the action adventure. It's very rare that you get games that balance those two elements so well. You get a game like Doom Eternal that's like 90% gameplay and 10% plot, or you get games where it's just, I would even argue that Cyberpunk is weighted maybe a little too heavy in the exposition department. But this game is right in the middle, which is what you're supposed to be when you're an action adventure game. So, and look, we're going to talk about it again. So I'm not going to go into all the other stuff that's awesome about The Last of Us Part 2, because we're going to need to focus on that for the specific things it was awarded with. Anything you want to add here, though, for action adventure, Matt?
No, I think that about covers it. The best parts of the first game were kind of exploring stuff and the narrative. I did not care for the action in the first Last of Us. I thought the action in Last of Us 2 was one of the biggest turnarounds and improvements from one game to the next I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Just in terms of not in just in terms of how it felt, but in terms of what you could do and how you could play with the systems and how you could like play scenarios and situations the way you wanted to.
Yep.
Was just it's the best Naughty Dog has ever done in that regard. So keeping it to sort of the category, I think it was a triumph in terms of them growing into really making the game be that.
Yep. Okay, up next, best platformer. Again, Matt and I agree, but again, this was an easy winner.
Yeah, this is not.
And the winner is Ori and the Will of the Wisps. An amazing, emotional roller coaster, pull your hair out experience. This is a game that I still remember from playing. I remember how I was surprised I was at how difficult some of the platforming was. I remember wondering if kids were going to be able to get through this stuff, and they probably can. But what I remember most about it is the story and the plot and the characters. It's just a very emotional game, which you don't get a lot of from platformers. To be honest with you, this is also another category where there just really weren't a lot of really strong contenders. Like the runner-up for me was like Spelunky 2. But that's not even that's more of like a puzzle game, really. I feel like.
I think the Astrobot thing was the only thing close.
Well, it was like at one point I was like Super Mario 3D All-Stars. I'm like, I can't give it that, even though it probably is technically the best platformer that was released in 2020. I mean,
it's got Super Mario 64 in it.
But those guys, those games have already got their.
They're old.
They've given Game of the Year to Super Mario Galaxy. So I had to come up with something that was from this year, and it's a great game. It's a great choice. And now everyone else has had a chance to play it. It's left Xbox and PC. It's on Switch now.
It's another example of a game that had a really good first game, and they managed to actually top it,
make it better
in the sequel, which is very difficult to do.
It's always the key to that is always knowing what made the first game great. And it seems like some developers can't seem to figure that out. It's almost like it's a mystery to them why their game does well. The studios that know why their games do well are the studios that make good sequels. That's pretty much how it works. But anyway, best platformer, a genre that's in and out of our awards yearly. Yeah. It's been in, it's been out. It's been in, it's been out. I have a feeling next year it's going to be in as well because we have stuff like Super Meat Boy 2 coming. We have some Nintendo stuff coming as well. So I think we'll probably have a nice 3-year streak going for platformers, which is good to see because it's one of my favorite genres. Next up, best strategy game, and this can run the gamut. Like Matt, if you wanted to pick like a strategy RPG for this, I'd be okay with it. So there is some latitude. You have like 4X strategy games, and you have like the turn-based like XCOM style stuff. I also love how this genre has kind of expanded over the last like really decade, I would say. Yeah,
like the strategy game I played the most this year did not come out this year, so it wasn't eligible. Like the thing I played the most this year was Stellaris.
Oh, interesting.
But which is really, really cool. I do like it. If you can get into it, like I had to watch YouTube tutorials on how to play it before I could really understand what was happening. But once you get into that, it really does give you the feeling of managing a giant galactic empire on a very as macro and micro a scale as you want, which is what I'm interested in. Yep. So that was pretty cool. But didn't come out this year, even though they are continuing to support it with really good expansion passes. But I wanted to give it a shout out, especially because it's on Xbox now, and it's pretty good on that too. But the 2020 strategy game I played the most was XCOM Chimera Squad, which surprised me a little bit as well, because I do like the XCOM games, but they frustrate me. I think they're supposed to, I think that's the intentional way. But for some reason, the Chimera Squad, for some reason, making the squad members real characters, like really worked for me. Like this is kind of a smaller scale game than XCOM 2. It's not trying to be like the big world. I mean, you do save the world more or less, but like It's
I
moving.
understand what you're saying.
It's moving the world a little past the kind of like, oh, aliens are invading, we got to do something. It's sort of like the aftermath of that and how like society has changed now that there's aliens on the planet and sort of everyone. It's a little Star Trek-y. It's a little like, how do we integrate all these different cultures into this one world? Especially because so many of them were used by the aliens in XCOM like against their will,
right?
And they explore that, and that's interesting. And then making everybody an actual character and having the squad be sort of like a bunch of real people
that you care about,
and that have dialogue, and you can tell who they are, and you're kind of like you want, and they interact with each other, and there's
that
sort
would
of
make a big difference. I can totally
it changes things a lot, and makes it even easier to sort of get wrapped up in things, and it's a little easier, I think, than the main games in the sense that like you have ways around permadeath if you want to save your guys and stuff. But overall, I thought this was a really cool sort of side thing to do with this franchise, and obviously XCOM 3 should happen too on the large scale, and see what else you can do with that. But I would really like to see them explore the world in these sort of smaller scale character driven games more. Like this was a really cool side thing I didn't expect to be as great as it was, and it was.
Awesome. My pick for the best strategy game of 2020 is a game that I just played this weekend, and it is Crusader Kings 3. I had never played a Crusader Kings game, and I was starting to get together the fantasy stuff from Matt and I over the past week, and I saw Crusader Kings on his list, and I was like, oh, wow, it got like a 9.1 aggregate. So I was like, I probably should play this game.
I have not played this game enough to make a call on it, really.
I never played the franchise, Matt, until this weekend, and I fell in love immediately.
Yeah, so, it's a treat.
Man, I am a huge Civ fan. Always have been, always will be. I'm a total sucker for the one more turn. If you are that, I actually would say do not buy this game. It took me away from other things that I wanted and in all honesty needed to do over the weekend, because it is just that one more turn. You can walk away and just leave it sit. But the difference that I found anyway, and I don't know if most people feel this way, but to me, the big difference with Crusader Kings and Civ is that Crusader Kings is more of like an RPG. There's more story in it. When you start the game, instead of it being like this empty map that you're trying to take over, it's filled with other leaders already that you need to interact with to conquer or to succeed. And just there's way more narrative in the game, and they do a really good job writing the narrative. I was like shocked at how interesting it was.
And it can go almost anywhere.
And then the more I played it, you start getting exposed to like, oh, dude, it's insane. Like I had crazy stuff. Like some of the stuff that was in that game, I'm like, what? Like, oh, you have the plague and or your kingdom has the plague and you could choose to lock your citizens out so they all die. Like there's a lot of choice in the game. There's a lot of characterization that's really good. The gameplay itself is like Civ, but a little more involved. The systems under the hood that are running are insane. It's a really, really good. It lives up to the hype, I guess is what I'm getting at. You may have seen the Crusader Kings 3 reviews and been like, oh, whatever. It's just the people who really like those games are going to give it it's a really, really good game. So I'm now a fan of Crusader Kings. Never thought I would be. I finally gave it a chance. And that's what everybody needs to do every once in a while. Give stuff a chance. You never know. I have written off Crusader Kings for like 10 years. I had people tell me how great it is. And that if I like Civ, I'm a fool for not playing Crusader Kings. And I blew them off. And they were right.
I did not put this game on my fantasy list for nothing.
It is really good, and it lives up to the aggregate score that it got. So if you like games like this, go buy it. I do not think you'll be disappointed. Next up, our favorite category, Matt, best game as a service, because, but we're experts. And I would also say maybe this is the award we're least qualified to give an award to. I have to do a lot of research for this category every year because it's just impossible for either one of us to stick with one game as a service all year, let alone like 5 of them. So a lot of times, like I play them all, like off and on throughout the course of the year, at least the ones that I would consider anyway. But a lot of times I have to go and look at a recap to remember like what were the drops and what came in those drops and how important were they and do they have problems with bugs and all that kind of stuff. And all that needs to be considered when you're talking about game as a service. This is like a new paradigm. So anyway, with that in mind, game as a service, as you know, it's an ongoing game. That's what they call it in the Game Awards. It's the game that never ends. It's Rainbow Six Siege. It's Destiny. Games like that just go on forever and ever. Matt, what is your pick for the best game as a service for 2020.
So my pick was the game as a service I played the most over the course of the year, which was Warframe.
I want to hear this, Matt, because I have not played Warframe since the launch of PS4, when I believe it was also free with PlayStation Plus.
Yes.
I played it for
it wasn't free. It was just free. Like Warframe
was just free to play already. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did play it, but I have not touched it since. So
you would not recognize it.
I've heard that. What have they done to it?
Well, some of it, not all of it happened this year, but at some point they added like basically open world areas. They've expanded, usually it starts in the solar system and you start with a few planets. The map on this game now expands out through I've been playing for a couple of years now. Ever since I've been playing on Xbox more than anything else, but I started on PC where at one point they put $120 DLC pack up for $5 by accident, and everybody bought it, and then they decided to let everybody keep it. So I'm like, oh, that's a good head start. I'll just play that. So I got into it that way, and then right after that, I think they added the open world stuff, and that's really cool. The story is at least on par with something like Destiny in terms of sort of like the world and the lore and the backstory and sort of what happens and the events, and there's things that happen.
I'm guessing
in the open world.
way they tell it isn't quite as polished.
No, it's just it's more like just VO over things. There's no cutscenes. There's not too many cutscene things. But it is very kind of addicting. It's fun. It's a satisfying combat system, both melee and shooting. The suits you get are weird looking, but you get attached to them weirdly. Like whatever one because they all have different strengths. There's ranged ones, or they do have different powers, and the one you end up kind of selling on to be your own. You get one basic kind of all around one for free, and then you can build up you either pay real money or build up your resources to craft other ones. I have found that it's pretty easy to not spend money in this game. Pretty much most of the suits are viable. There are better and worse ones, but if you're just playing PvE, you're probably going to be your skill level with any kind of general shooter is probably going to be good enough that you're going to be able to get through what you need to get through. As long as you're paying attention to the levels of the missions and quests you're on. And it's just a really good sort of way to kind of log in once a day, play a couple of shooting missions and call it a day. You get something done and it's just a quick little shot. I'm just not rested on their laurels. They continually do new events. Some of the events
watching this trailer, Matt. I didn't even recognize it.
No, it's a whole.
It's insane. Everything is completely different.
No, and I will say this: I haven't played a ton of the world events because sometimes I'm just not high enough level to participate. But sometimes I miss them or whatever. But and I'm still working my way through sort of I think the first couple generations of new narrative content because there's a lot. There's a lot of game here if you care to play all.
They've been
of it.
building it for 10 years.
Yeah, a long time. And basically there's in a lot of ways you play this game and you're like, why isn't Destiny like this? It's not on the level of presentationally, but in terms of just stuff to do and a wide open places to be and go, there's elements of this that are better. And certainly they figured it out. Some of it they figured out earlier than Destiny. Destiny feels like it stumbled a lot before it kind of got where it got.
Well, Destiny is a bigger investment to change stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
An indie game, you're very nimble. It's a lot harder to turn around Titanic.
Yeah, Digital Extremes is not answering and anybody on this. That's true. And hopefully that will help Bungie now that they're not answering anybody. Now that they're free of Activision. Which I imagine was part of the problem.
I'm sure.
But you can see here, you've got space sequences now where you can get in these winged things that let you transform and fly around. There's
this is Warframe.
There's hoverboards.
It was this weird melee game is what I remember of it.
No, it's always been shooting, but the swords are fun.
Yeah.
It's
worthy pick.
If you played Warframe 5 years ago, try it again. Because it's not the game you played before.
Yep. Okay.
And I go back to it pretty regularly. When nothing else was coming out during the summer and stuff, I was playing this a lot.
Okay. So. For me, best game as a service came down to two games. The first game was Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Despite not liking the actual combat of the game, I still ended up playing a lot of it because it's Call of Duty is like my fidget spinner. I'm waiting for my wife to do something, although this year there wasn't as much as that as there has been in the past. But if I'm waiting for my wife to get ready to do something, I'll just play a round of Call of Duty. So I still ended up playing a lot of Modern Warfare. And I got to say, I was pretty blown away by the content train that came to that game. It was just steady, varied, and consistent. And then, they got Warzone up and running and turned it into a smash hit in Modern Warfare. That's really where it really took off. It was, as a game as a service, Modern Warfare was really, really good. But I did not give it the award for best game as a service because the game that I ended up choosing for it was something that will continue on. And I struggle, and I know this is best game as a service for 2020, but for me, the two games were basically on equal footing. And when I looked at one that was like, hey, we just have to get all this stuff done and then we're finished and we don't touch the game again. I look at this other one that has a plan to sustain the game into infinity. I gave the nod to the game with the bigger plan. And also because they're executing very well on that plan. And that game is Apex Legends. I don't know if you guys remember, but it launched great. Everybody fell in love with it immediately. And then there was this huge content drought that, in all honesty, almost killed the game. And I think that Respawn just had not anticipated that it would be that big and just didn't have DLC ready. It probably thought it didn't need it. But once the game was a hit and Respawn got its ass in gear.
You must always feed the beast. They learned that lesson hard.
Seriously, go back and look at the timeline of Apex Legends for this year. What it has released in sequence and how big it is. And the other thing, too, that I liked about what Apex Legends did is that its special modes were actually special. They weren't some corny thing where everyone has like a pumpkin head or a big head or they have big feet or their guns are like twice. No, they found modes that were based around gameplay and modes and concepts instead of just goofy gimmicks. So Apex Legends really hit its stride in 2020. I don't know if it's going to continue into 2021 as far as good as it's been this year, but it had an amazing year. And for me, it is the best game as a service for 2020.
I can't believe Avengers didn't win anything.
Surprise. Although I have a feeling some people may think we may give it to something else here very soon. I know that makes no sense to those of you watching the live stream. I'm sorry. Next up is a big one. It's best platform of the year. This isn't like what console had the best graphics in 2020. That's not how this works. Best platform is a combination of everything. It is the hardware, the software, the services, everything. It's what platform was the best platform to own in 2020, according to Matt and I anyway. And this is another case where we have the same winner, and it is PlayStation 4. Is that 3 years straight? Did we give it to Switch 1 year? I think I did 1 year.
I didn't.
Yeah, I don't think you ever did.
I don't think I would have done that.
Yeah, I think it's been PS4 straight for you almost this whole gen. Or ever since we've done these, I think.
Like even when Nintendo knocks it out of the park for a year, usually Sony's exclusives continue to carry it for me. Like
last year was rough for Sony exclusives, though.
Yeah, last year was a dead zone.
Not this year, though.
No.
Holy cow. We got two of the best games of the generation, literally like weeks apart. We got The Last of Us Part 2, and we got Ghost of Tsushima. Bang, bang.
And then later we got Spider-Man Miles Morales and Spider-Man Remastered and Demon's
Souls remake, and it's...
And yeah, it
well,
just
that's obviously
stop.
not PS4, but...
Right, but PlayStation.
Yeah, but Sony. PS4 is the winner, and it deserves the winner. The Switch has had other than Animal Crossing, a pretty forgettable year. There's been some blips here and there for Nintendo, but Animal Crossing has really been the one big hit. Yeah. And that's just the nature of the beast. Nintendo's kind of run out of IP at this point for Switch.
Yeah, they're hiring boss designers for Metroid Prime 4 now. I feel like that's going to be a Switch 2 game at this rate.
Yeah, it is. I think it is. We're still waiting on Metroid. We're still waiting on Bayonetta. I mean, there's
still waiting on Shin Megami Tensei.
Yep, still waiting on.
We're still waiting on too. Still waiting on a lot of stuff that we saw in the Switch initial game reveal.
I know. Breath of the Wild 2, I do think will be coming next year, though. I would agree with that. And that will change everything for Switch for next year. It could be like the game of the forever in a lot of people's minds, as the last one was. So anyway, there you go. Best platform, PlayStation 4. It's really hard to even argue against it this time. I can't. I mean, it's my job to play.
You just said best platform PlayStation 4 as the B-roll showed just installed Killzone Shadowfall. So I was like, it's come a long way, baby.
It has. In fact, it has, for sure. But it's like, as the host of this stuff, like I have to be devil's advocate. Like I have to try to find what's the counter argument to this. And I think that's one thing I tend to do pretty well. But nothing here, man. I cannot find a counter argument. I can't be devil's advocate for this. PS4 wins it, hands down.
Yeah, this year it's not a competition, really.
And next year, it'll be interesting next year, for sure. We'll start seeing some of that first-party Microsoft stuff. It should be a good year for Switch. And we're going to get Ratchet and Clank and all this stuff for PS5.
Yeah, right now PS5 looks like they have the strongest opening volley.
Provided
but we'll see.
Everything makes
it, yeah.
That's the big X factor. As always, if we see.
And again, we don't really know anything about the second half of next year.
Yeah, we don't.
So
that's true. Although I think a lot of the stuff to schedule for the first half will end up being
some of it
to the second half. Okay, so best platform, PS4, unanimous, Matt and I. Next up, best story, another category. Matt and I chose the same game. This isn't even close, Matt, as far as us choosing the same.
Yeah. I think it's even close, this pick, which I also agree with. This is another one that second place would be a blood sport fight.
Yeah.
But first place, this was not a question.
Clear as day, The Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah.
It may be the best story ever told in a video game.
It's certainly in terms of...
I hate throwing hyperbole like that.
I don't like doing that either, but I think it's true. In terms of structure and presentation and narrative design, I don't think there's anything... It's also one of the only, I've hammered this a lot of times over the year, but this is one of the only uses of the flashback device I've seen in a video game that is thematically and structurally necessary.
Yeah.
Like you have to tell this story in the order they tell it for the thematic and narrative impact that it has in the end. There's no other way around it. If you told it in chronological order, or a kind of an interleaved cross-cutting thing back and forth between the characters, you would lose the impact of what it's trying to do.
Yeah,
and that is very, very hard to do. It's
I just like that they didn't nerf the story. Like, look, Naughty Dog knew some of the stuff that was going to happen in this game was going to piss people off. So you could think to yourself, well, how can we soften the blow to make sure that our fans don't hate us? What can we do to stand down the edges a little bit to make it so it isn't so tough to handle? Instead, they were like, no, F that. We're going to make sure they feel this. And you needed it because you have to rationalize what happens after that. And and it's so hard to just talk about this without spoiling anything. Without this scene that a lot of people are very angry over, you can't have the rest of the game. That was amazing. The way stories work.
They have to be true to the world they've made.
Right.
And everything that happens in this game is.
Yes, absolutely. That's one thing I will say too. Their franchise Bible, they hold to it, man. Like they are like, this is the way this franchise is, and this is the way we're going to do it, and we're going to stick to our.
There was never going to be a happy ending in this world.
No, how could there be?
The idea that anyone thought that was some kind of weird betrayal is
think
nonsense.
You're going to find a boat and go to Hawaii and there are any zombies? I don't know what they think was going to happen. We saw how
that ended in the Dawn of the Dead remake.
That's right. Absolutely.
The boat doesn't save you.
Yeah. So anyway, it was just an amazing story. I loved it from beginning to end. I know some people think it was, whoa, I don't care about any of that stupid crap. It was an amazing story, period.
And it's just look, there are people, and I agree with them, who say this was the greatest story I was told. I guess the best game I played, whatever. I didn't have fun. It wasn't fun playing it.
Grueling.
It's a grueling thing to go through. It's not, and I don't think games have to be fun.
I play, you feel like you have to take a shower.
Same thing when I go to see a Gaspar Noé movie, I do not I do not expect to have a good time.
You try to go during the day, so when you walk out, you see the sun instead of
sometimes that doesn't work. I saw Climax with Jason Chung at 10 in the morning on a Sunday, and we came out of that at noon, and we're just like, what do we do now? It's all sunny and beautiful.
We're ruined. For at least 2 days.
You want to get lunch? No,
I really don't. I may not eat for a weekend. So anyway, best story. I think most people will agree with that, or at least understand where we're coming from on that one. Next up, this is a category that I really love. This is one of the funnest ones I think that we do every year. It's called Future Legend. This is where Matt and I try to figure out which game or games from 2020 are going to be looked at 25, 30 years from now by people like us when I'm probably long gone. And they're like, oh, that game, that's the game that did this. And people are still talking about it forever from now. And this is always a hard one to pick, but I also feel like a lot of times Matt and I pull some really good stuff out of our butts in this category. So Matt, for you, what is your pick for future legend?
My pick, and I think this is pretty bulletproof, is Animal Crossing New Horizons.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because I think for a very large chunk of people who just play video games, period, when they think of 2020, they are going to think of this game because everybody bought this thing and played it through the pandemic every day of that, especially the first like half of the lockdown phase, like March to at least July, you were probably playing this game. And I think it's going to be indelibly imprinted in people's memories. Yeah,
the cultural part of it is.
Yeah, as a part of this experience, this like species-wide psychic wound we are going to have at the end of all this. Animal Crossing is going to be part of that. And I guarantee you in 10, 15, 20 years when people are making like the documentaries about the plague year and stuff, Animal Crossing New Horizons is going to be brought up.
It will be in there. And they'll be like, and then this Nintendo game came out that made everybody happy for 2 days.
Yeah.
And then everybody went back.
It's going to be the little segment of the documentary that makes everybody happy again before they get into like how horrible it became after
the
that.
Rest
It's like,
it was, yeah.
It's like because you got to have the tone shift. You got to keep people up and bring them down. You got to bring them up, bring them down. Yeah. So that'll be part of that.
I totally get it.
But I think. Yeah, I think this is the 2020 game for a lot of people, and as much as it was not something I stuck with too long, this is definitely going to be one of the 3 or 4 games people look back on 2020 and think, oh yeah, Animal Crossing. Definitely.
Yeah. Yep, agreed. I'll be one of them. But I did pick something different. I picked Cyberpunk 2077, and I think for some of the same reasons, Matt, because it has become this huge story. Like, I think this game will be remembered more now because they released it as a piece of junk.
I think in terms of industry impact, absolutely. Like, I think this game's I think it's going to change things.
Yes, that was exactly what I was going to say. It is going to impact. No one is ever going to do this again. Because a lot of them aren't going to be able to afford to refund everybody's money like CD Projekt Red did.
Well, it also kind of torpedoes the crunch thing, doesn't it?
Yep, it sure does. It's like, dude, they're like, we had to crunch.
Didn't help.
It didn't help at all. It's crazy. So again, there's cultural angles to this. I also think that eventually this game is going to be one of the best RPGs ever made. I just am being honest with you, having played pretty much all of it and basically trying to mentally subtract all the negative moments I've had with crashes and bugs, I think this game is ultimately going to be one of the best. And it's going to take a while to get there. Witcher 3, it took it a good probably year and a half, 2 years to kind of get to that game of the year, true game of the year quality. And I would not be surprised if it takes this game that long as well. But I think, 10 years from now, when they're doing top 10.
I hope one day we just see stuff as dynamic as we're seeing in this B-roll.
Right.
Stuff like that doesn't happen just around town yet.
Yep.
So far.
Yep. Well, keep playing. Yeah. But anyway, I know a lot of you guys may be like, oh, Shane may be crazy. Keep playing if you can fight through the bugs. And you're going to see that this is an amazing game that is just broken. Sadly, it's broken. But in a couple years' time, I think it will be looked at as one of the greatest RPGs ever until it's replaced by CD Projekt Red's next.
I mean, it can happen. Like, look how Skyrim is looked on as, I think almost universally positively. People forget that it literally didn't work on PS3 when it came out.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, Matt. To me,
still doesn't really.
If Cyberpunk didn't have all the bugs, I would like it more than The Witcher. Like, I'm more of a Cyberpunk guy than like a fantasy guy. And so part of that plays into it too for me, obviously, because I like kind of the futuristic, slick stuff more than just like the traditional like high fantasy stuff.
It's funny that I don't like high fantasy stuff in anything but video games.
Yeah.
Like that's the only, I prefer it to science fiction usually in video games, but I like science fiction better in almost every other medium. I don't know why that is. Maybe I just like swords. Like, I don't know.
Yep.
I am using a katana in this game.
And I do believe that CD Projekt Red will get it fixed eventually. It's going to happen.
I mean, they've done that with every game they've, look, we said it. People in the chat said it. Everyone said it. It's like CD Projekt Red stuff launches busted. Yeah, like they always do. They always.
I think we just all hoped that it would have learned its lesson this time.
Yeah, I think if there's one lesson I've learned over the last few years from CD Projekt Red is that they haven't learned anything.
Yeah.
So
Yep. So anyway, that's my future legend, Cyberpunk 2077. Next up, another fun category, most pleasant surprise. We've talked about a couple of those, and I'll be honest with you, when I mentioned them earlier, I tried to stay away from my pick. I had a couple of these, and honestly, up until I printed out the rundown for the show, I had 2 games here, and I finally made the pick at the last minute. So, Matt, for you, what was, and also, by the way, this can be anything. This doesn't have to be a game. It could be something that happened or whatever. And Matt, what was your pick for a most pleasant surprise?
Well, certainly nothing that happened was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, not many of those in 2020.
My most pleasant surprise was Immortals: Phoenix Rising. Which we obviously we'd seen it, we'd heard of it, but it'd gone dark for a long time,
and then came back with a new title.
Yeah, suddenly popped up with a terrible new title and a new kind of look to it a little bit. And then it's coming out in December. Like what the like? Okay, wow, I don't know. Like it's like 3 months before release, we suddenly see this thing comes back again. So cool. And we'd been through a lot of open world games this year. We played a lot of stuff that are over and over, but this thing popped up and was right in the waiting for Cyberpunk section of December. But I really kind of fell in love with this thing in a weird way. It's exactly the balance of like kind of levity and mindless open world stuff I needed at the time. I actually do think it's pretty funny. I know you don't. I think some of the banter is falls dead, but some of it actually has made me laugh. And it's snappy and I like how it looks.
It's not like all their other games. It's finally Ubisoft doing something different with its open world.
Yeah, it's like you can see they're using the research they did for Odyssey's mythology to but they're still letting it run wild. Like all the references actually make sense. If you know Greek mythology, much like Hades, all the references track with like actual mythology. It's a lot of fun in that regard, and it's a simpler, but it's also a kind of a wackier, like over the top combat system that I've enjoyed sort of learning and slowly like upgrading to the point that I can tackle the bigger enemies and like, oh, now that's how it works, and you can do the slow-mo stuff, and it's cool. It's kind of like an easier, more accessible Assassin's Creed, like you said, sort of my first Assassin's Creed. It's a gateway probably for kids. It's also kind of sectioned off and discreet. It's not like it's not this sprawling thing that you can get overwhelmed with. You can take it in chunks if you want to. Yeah. And I like that about it. And it takes there's a lot of talk of the Breath of the Wild inspiration, but I think you need a little more than just a stamina bar when you climb something in a hang glider to be a Breath of the Wild clone. You can understand why the comparisons. Sort of, but the thing they took from Breath of the Wild that is the most significant and most beneficial to it, and probably also to Breath of the Wild, is the line of sight idea. The fact that you can be up high and see everything all the time and see where you want to go forever. And just go there. You can literally, you can see like, I'm not even exaggerating. It must be like 100 miles you can see. Yeah, you can see the other side of the world from certain places. You can see the other end of the world. No fogging, no anything. It's amazing. Yeah, it's really great. And so I really enjoy. I haven't gone back to it since Cyberpunk because I've been focusing on that, but I will probably soon. Certainly now that we're kind of done with the show for the year and I can play what I want for a while. I will go back to some of that, and it's a game I'm going to get for a couple people for Christmas because I feel like it kind of flew under the radar. Like people didn't notice. It's good for kids of all ages. Yeah, even kids our age, even adult kids. Yeah. Exactly. My pick for most pleasant surprise is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 remake. I thought I'll be honest with you, I thought the Tony Hawk franchise was dead. Done. I mean, even Tony. I think Tony Hawk thought that. He said it was done. The best thing he would give over the last few years was like, a couple people pitched me on like a mobile game, and I was like, well, I don't want that. So I guess your franchise is just dead. No, it wasn't. Not only did they bring it back, they brought back what they should bring back, which were the first couple games. Now, I will say this. I liked playing for the first like 5 or 6 hours. After a while, I was like, okay, I've done all this. And the better visuals and the higher frame rates were enough to keep me playing. But to me, I feel like if Tony Hawk was going to come back, that's the only way it could have come back. Now I feel like the door is open for Activision and Tony to work on a new game, although hopefully they don't just continue to bloat it like the franchise eventually became. And I think the reason people liked this is because the first Tony Hawk games were simple. You just had to score high and grab V8 VCR tapes. Like, it started to become way too complicated. And I think this kind of reset for the franchise, in addition to being fun to play and totally worth whatever money you ended up spending on it, I think this is what it needed to
guarantee that there was any kind of a future for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. So I was shocked that it was announced, and then we had it in like a month, and I was even more surprised by how good it was. So to me, it was the double pleasant surprise for 2020. Next up, yet another category where Matt and I have the same winner, although I think as soon as we tell you what the category is, actually just put the graphic up. And everybody just guessed what this one is that Matt and I have both.
They've already guessed and they're wrong.
Oh, they did? Oh, and they're wrong?
Yeah.
No way.
The thing I've seen predicted is so far as Avengers.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, there you go then. The most disappointing game for 2020, Matt and I agree, is Cyberpunk 2077. Mm-hmm. I feel like but I did say this before the show. You were like, people will just know right away. And I was like, well, I don't know. Avengers was pretty disappointing too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think Avengers was more pleasant surprise than disappointing in the end.
Yeah, I think what happened, though, at least through the course of this stream, is that we've said a lot of good things about, at least I have, about Cyberpunk. So they probably figured Shane can't give it most disappointing. And if they both have the same guess, it's got to be Avengers. So I totally understand where you could have got to that place. But no, it is Cyberpunk 2077. I can still think it's a really good game and ultimately will be a great game, and say that it's hugely disappointing. I would also say, Matt, that this game was set up for this category. Like,
yeah, I mean, you could argue that even
if it was really good, people would want to give it to this game. I bet. Like, it was the hype for this game. There was 8 million pre-orders. The hype for this game was completely out of control. And look, we had part in that. Partly our fault. We hyped it up. Everybody hyped it up. But ultimately, I think even if the game were great, you still have a lot of people saying it's the most disappointing thing I played this year was Cyberpunk. So I still really enjoy it. And I think it's going to be something truly special whenever they finally finish it, which is funny to say. Mm-hmm. But
more like Cyberpunk 77% complete.
Yeah, but still, it's compared to like what I expected from the game and where it was at launch, it's the most disappointing easily.
Oh yeah,
I actually liked Avengers, so I don't know.
And I'm harsher. I think I'm harsher on Cyberpunk than you are. I find it more disappointing. Yeah. It's also fascinating to watch this demo because it's all in the game, but it's also not in the game.
They're just doing it all together in chains and combos, and they're like, when I use stuff in the game, I use like the one thing. Like
I'm talking about the cutscenes.
I'm not watching the B-roll, unfortunately.
Because the B-roll is showing like the old cutscenes and like when it was third person, basically. When they showed the character.
Oh, gotcha.
Which is very different. And you
can see how the game evolved over time. Yeah. We have our TriCaster is loaded with Cyberpunk.
Oh yeah,
there's enough media in there to last a whole episode of Game Face for sure.
But in terms of like the disappointment, it's like for me, it's more that like you can constantly see what it should be, and it just isn't.
And you're just disappointed in CD Projekt Red for doing this crap.
And that doesn't even get into the whole like thing of how they released it, the hiding of things.
That's all disappointing too. Yeah, it's an easy winner. Next up, biggest news story. And there were some news stories this year, let me tell you. Usually for this, like I have to pick between like 3 or 4. There were like 12 this year that you had to choose from. And I think both of us probably picked the 2 best ones. Matt, what was yours?
Mine is like, to me, there wasn't really competition here. There was a bunch, again, a very tough second place competition, but the number one thing for me has to be COVID-19's impact on the game industry.
Or on everything.
Both on everything, but I mean, we're obviously focusing on games here. And both in terms of good and bad, because, obviously it's good monetarily because games are selling and hardware is selling like crazy because people have nothing else to do but stay in their homes and play video games. Also in terms of the human costs and the loss of life is bad and impacting everybody and impacting developers and companies are having to deal with that. And there's going to be a lot of medical payouts and stuff like that and people losing their benefits. The human cost is astronomical. You've got the moving to working from home, which has created a lot of delays. Some stuff has slipped out of the year. I wonder how much of that impacted of that Cyberpunk 2077. Yep. But at the same time, the move to work from home as the dust sort of settles on that, Square Enix has said that employees can work from home forever now if they want to.
Yep.
So it could lead to a big
change.
quality of life upgrade
Yep.
for a lot of these developers. If they don't have to do the commute, don't have to be stuck in the office, they can work from home and choose what time of the day that they are doing their work versus what they need to take care of with their family and their home life. So in the end, you could have a lot of benefits out of it. Like nothing is going to.
It's the whole category's biggest news story. That's why it's the biggest news story.
Nothing is going to be the same.
It reaches so many different corners.
Yeah, nothing's going to be the same after this in any respect.
Yeah.
But in terms of the industry, you are going to you've seen a lot of changes both in the immediate in terms of release schedules, and I think in the long term. The fact that you can do so much of this from home and still get stuff out and still get stuff finished and still get stuff on time, you're kind of running out of excuses. I mean, it's not just the game industry, it's kind of business in general, but it's like you're running out of reasons to have offices on a regular basis. You don't need all 400 people on the team in the same office all the time. Everybody can kind of live wherever they want and do what they want. That's as long as people have internet, you've got it.
Shift. Absolutely.
So I think in terms of that, both in terms of what's happened this year itself, and in terms of what's going to happen over the next 10 years as a result, the pandemic is the story.
Okay, we got to pick up the pace. We're taking too long with each one of these. We're already over time.
It's a good thing we agree on so many of them.
It is. It's helping because otherwise we'd be here till like 8 p.m. Next up, well, actually, I haven't given you my winner for that category yet for biggest news story. I went kind of in the same vein as Matt in that I tried to find a story that would have a domino effect for many years to come. Obviously, COVID going to change everything from here on out forever. Something else that I think will change everything from here on out forever was Microsoft buying Bethesda. To me, it changes everything. It changes the other platforms because likely they won't be getting Bethesda games anymore. And it completely changes the fortunes of Xbox. Now, I don't know how much it's going to change their fortunes for Xbox Series X, but whatever the next console is, they're set. So I was a vocal critic of Microsoft's moves and everything it had done really for the last 8 years. Finally, it figured it out and did what really it should have done like 4 years ago. And if it had done it 4 years ago, it would be in a much better position right now to launch the Xbox Series platform. So I don't know. To me, the sale of Bethesda to Xbox is something that will, like COVID, will reverberate across all corners of the industry. Even third-party or independent studios right now, they look at that sale and they're like, maybe we should start shopping ourselves around. It was a big purchase that's going to change a lot of things for a lot of people, and it was a big surprise as well. And so that's why it's my biggest news story of 2020. Next up, another fun category, the worst game we played. We had to eventually change the title of this category because everybody was just like, oh, it's the worst game. No, it's not the worst game. We can't decide what the absolute worst game is that came out in 2020 because we have to play them all. So these are just the worst games that Matt and I played, which by extension would probably be most likely the worst games that y'all played too. So Matt, what's the worst game you played in 2020?
Well, as you say, I'm sure there were worse games released, but the worst time I had with a game this year was Final Fantasy VII Remake, which no one will be surprised by if you've been watching this show. I just find, this almost made my most disappointing as well, because I was really hoping they could pull out something special with this game, and as far as I'm concerned, they did not. This is... you're even watching one of the things that right there. It's like, okay, I don't understand the obsession with this game, with the Final Fantasy team, especially Nomura, of having everything kind of look so realistic and so like this approaching sort of that anime photo-real sort of hybrid thing. And then suddenly someone just spinning a motorcycle around like it weighs 5 pounds and none of it makes any, and like the physics don't matter anymore. And it's just it's just silly to me.
I agree. I thought the game was silly.
It is very silly, and I can't take any of it seriously.
That's actually the best word to describe that game, man. I don't know how you pulled that out, but that is the best word to describe the Final Fantasy. And I would use goofy, too. Yeah, that would maybe make more sense for Kingdom Hearts. But I
don't think that, the localization wasn't good. Like we said, the anime grunting is just distracting and irritating the whole time. Nothing really happens. There's a whole middle section of the game where like they add a bunch of stuff that wasn't in the original, and you can do that. That's fine, but it doesn't advance anything, doesn't improve anything. So you're just wasting time because you don't know how to do the part where you leave after you leave Midgar until you were leaving that to the next remake game. So you're kind of stalling for time for about half the game's runtime. There's too much weird, like ancient game, like level design.
I can play any Nintendo game, no problem. Don't even think twice about it. When I played this game, I felt like I was too old for the game.
Yeah, it's honestly embarrassing.
It's like
embarrassing
Mario
to play.
I'm okay with, but yeah, it's like I don't even know how to explain it. I was like, this is a kid's game. Like while I was playing it, but I'll play Mario or all Nintendo's like kid-friendly stuff. I don't know.
I get it. Like it's one of those things. Like I've said it before, the golden age of science fiction is 12 because it's whatever you experienced when you were 12 years old.
Yeah.
And like I was not 12 years old when Final Fantasy VII came out. Like I was too old for this when it came out, and I'm apparently still too old for the remake. So the nostalgia goggles are completely off for me on this game, and to me, it's just an ancient, archaic, creaky money grab.
Well, I liked it more than you did, but not by a ton.
That's part of my thing is like the ancient dungeon design, the shitty shimmying through tiny things to cover load time that shouldn't even be there. It's just I feel like Square and Nomura like basically conned the fan base. I feel like they deserve. I feel like they deserve better than.
I think they worked hard on it. I just think that the base game is what it is. Like
the base game doesn't have to be this terrible dungeon level design. It doesn't have to be like that. Yeah. Like you can take the concepts and the situations presented in the original game and make something cool out of it.
That's where I stopped playing the game. So right. I hear you, man. Like I couldn't get through that section of the game.
Like there's nothing in this game that justifies to me why they had to split this up into multiple parts.
There's also no reason that it's as long as it is.
So part of it to me, even if they don't agree with me, is I think the fans of this game deserve better than what they were given here.
Okay. Worst game I played this year? Disintegration. I don't know if you guys even remember this game.
I don't even remember this.
It is
now I do.
It is a first-person shooter RTS hybrid from a former Halo developer. And what I learned from this atrocious game is that just because somebody worked on a team that made a really good game, it doesn't mean their game is going to be good or maybe even average.
Was this pre-pandemic? Was this like very early in the year?
Yeah, it was early in the year. Yep. And I admire that chances are he probably invested a lot of his own money into developing this game. And I like that he had this concept and he stuck with it and he saw it through and he eventually released it, but it just doesn't work. The mechanics in it don't work. The game looks terrible. It was just so bug riddled, and they tried to do a campaign and it was even more awkward. Like it's awful. It's the worst game I played this year. And I did play some other bad ones, but this was the only one that I played where I almost felt like offended that I had actually like spent time on it. So
luckily, it seems like most people dodged this bullet. So.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't end up selling very well. It came and went because it didn't review very well, but it was the worst game I played this year. Next up, category that's also fun called The Game That We Didn't Get. This is a game that everybody loves and seems to be all over, and we're just like, what are these people thinking? I don't get it. So what is your pick for the game you didn't get, Matt?
Well, I didn't want to repeat myself from worst game.
I'll do it for you.
So my pick for this, even though I liked it and I talked it up a fair amount on the show, my pick is Genshin Impact because
that built a lot of hype.
I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's actually pretty surprisingly good value for what you get, considering it's free. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't really have to. I played a fair amount of it and didn't feel like I ever had to spend money on it. And like for a single player open world RPG for nothing, pretty great. But there are people who just treat this like it's the second coming, and I don't get it. Like
it's free, and I got sucked in. That's free. All there is to it.
But it's like there's not much to this, and I also don't understand. Look, I'm not a Breath of the Wild devotee by any stretch of imagination, but this game is not Breath of the Wild.
Are they trying to say that?
Trying to say it's like a Breath of the Wild clone or something. And it's just like, no, just because there's a stamina meter when you climb something does not make it Breath of the Wild. Just because you can hang glide doesn't make it Breath of the Wild.
Apparently that's all it takes, Matt. Those two elements.
No, it's a very it's not bad, but people I don't get.
No, the hype train for this is huge, man. I totally get what you're saying.
So in terms of just not getting it, I get why people go crazy for Final Fantasy VII Remake, even if my reasons for that is not, even if my explanation for that is not very flattering to those who go nuts for it. This one, I don't even have a theory. It's just, I guess because it's free. I guess you're right, because it's free and it's just like high quality for something you would get for free that doesn't really push you into the gacha elements too much, unless you really desperately want particular characters, in which case I guess you are kind of stuck with that. But I feel like it gave me enough of a roster to work with just kind of, organically, that I've never felt the need to spend any money on the gacha stuff. I haven't gotten super far into it because it's just, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Well, I think that says a lot.
It's true. Yeah. But it's just like, I'm not compelled to keep going back to it in the way that I am to something like Warframe. Otherwise, this might have been.
And that's also free, by the way. So
yeah. So which also might have been, and this is a candidate for ongoing game as a service. Yep. But it's just an element of it that, like, once I kind of got into it and kind of got through the early kind of act one and everything, I kind of felt like I got it. I understood what it was about, and I didn't see much else down the road that was going to change things up or make things more interesting for me. So I just sort of drifted away from it. And I know some people that are just rabid for this game.
Huge.
I don't get it.
Huge.
I
don't either. I mean, it's not my pick, but I agree with you that it's a good pick.
and I will still say, like, go try it. Like I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not trying to tear it down and say it's a terrible game. It's a good game. But I
got the hard drive space.
Yeah.
Go for it. Yep.
I do have it installed on my PS5. Like, I'm not bagging on it in that regard, but it's just like the size of the praise it gets is a little to me.
Oh, by the way, Vincent says that the multiplayer in Disintegration's already been shut down. So
oh, wow.
So there you go. Okay, the game that I didn't get is Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I don't really need to rehash what I just said in the prior category when talking about Matt's pick. But like I said, I feel like a child when I'm playing the game. And I have no problem playing any other game that's meant for kids. I don't know what it is about it. I got to that big dead section in the middle that Matt talked about. I never made it past it. I just don't get it. I try to get it because it's like, I understand the nostalgia around Final Fantasy VII. I was a huge gamer. Like, I had just launched my website, and like, it wasn't even like I was just buying and playing a lot of games. I was already covering games when Final Fantasy VII came out. So I'm trying to understand why people are so attached to it. I've never been able to figure it out all this time, Matt. I haven't. And to me, honestly, I think the remake is better than the original in a lot of ways. I enjoyed playing a lot of it more.
I certainly understand a lot of what they're going for in a lot of parts of it that I never understood. In part because you just can't tell what the hell's happening.
Right, because the sprites and the graphics were so bad. And just Final Fantasy VII just came out at this awkward time in between tech, basically. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of caught in this no man's land forever, and it's just lost there. So I actually enjoyed parts of the remake better than the original game, but I just don't understand the fascination around the original at all, which means by proxy, I don't understand the obsession with the remake either. Early on, I was like, "Oh, this is work. I get more of like what they're trying to go for thematically and sort of like narratively than I did in the original game. Partly because I can see people's faces and I understand what the expressions and like the implications of things are more out there and clearer. But like eventually, like you say, like the middle part just falls apart and there's nothing. You're just like, what am I doing? I don't know how people made it through that section. They just have to be hardcore fans. That's all I can figure. Okay, next up, best graphics. And we're entering the big categories now, people, where we have runners up and winners. And like I said, the first one is best graphics. Matt, what is your runner up?
My runner up is Spider-Man Miles Morales.
A wise choice.
Yes, this is obviously the PlayStation 5 sort of like flagship game. There is, and a lot of the graphics on this are obviously amazing. Like if you've got it on quality. I played on quality, 30 frames a second, rock solid with the ray tracing on, all that stuff. All the bells and whistles in that regard are amazing. But I am going to focus on this with the thing that I really think puts Miles Morales over the top, and the previous Spider-Man as well, is the animation.
Yeah, it's incredible.
The animation in this game is
the first Spider-Man was like that too.
Oh yeah, this one is next. This one is next level though. Yeah. Like there is so much happening frame to frame with Miles in this that it's ridiculous. Like
if you slow it down
slow it down. Go to SUNY Legends Twitter and look up his Miles Morales gifs that he's done. Go look at James Ham, who's one of the animators on this game. He did a lot of the swinging stuff in this game, and he posts a lot of stuff on Twitter.
That stuff's great too. His awkward swinging mechanics.
Yeah, and all his like stunts he does, because you don't maybe
fun swinging.
You don't maybe realize early on, like, the stunts in this are not just, because in the first game it was a little more simple. It's like hold the button and hit the D-pad, and he does a little stuff. Miles has combos. Miles has like up, down, like do different ones. Like he can like kind of rest in the midair and then like switch out of it. Yeah. Like it's the character that's expressed on a moment to moment basis in this game by everyone you run into, even just the pedestrians, is amazing. And it creates a sense of place in conjunction with the graphics that are operating on that PS5 level, that it's just like nothing else. Like it blew me away in a way that I wasn't expecting to be blown away by a game that basically takes place in the same map as a game I played 2 years ago.
And also, Matt, it's just a PS4 game.
Yeah.
I remember that whole argument. The Xbox fans were like, that's not really an exclusive. Okay.
It's like, of all the arguments you should be making, that's really not the one you want to make.
I'd like to see one of them boot up Miles Morales in a PS5 and tell me it's not next gen.
Yeah, it's incredible. And now they've added ray tracing to the performance mode, so you can play it in 60 frames a second. It's not on the same level, but it's a triumph. And you rarely see launch games like really live up to kind of the promise of what you think this new hardware should do, and Miles Morales is one of those games.
Yep. For me, my runner-up, and generally how I do these, and it's not on purpose, it just kind of ends up working out this way. Usually one of my picks is just for like raw horsepower, like eye-popping, like which has the most polys and all the effects. And then my other pick will take kind of art and artistic elements into account. So my runner-up is the brute force pick, and it is the Demon's Souls remake. Nothing this year has shocked me like that game has. And it's subtle because the game is so dark that it's really hard to make out detail. But it's like just that flicker of a torch that just catches like an enemy the right way. And then you see the detail. And it's petrifying. Like the first time you see some of the faces of the enemies in this game, and you'll fight like 15 of them before you ever really get a good look at each one of the enemies. And it's just mind-blowing. Everything about it, the lighting. Now, obviously, it was hampered by the fact that it was based off a prior game. And so we're not getting like the gigantic draw distances that we're going to see in Ratchet and games like Horizon. But just to see the texture quality, all the effects, the character model detail, the environmental detail, the frame rate, when all that stuff is firing at once, it's a beast. And it's just a start. Like, man, that is the beginning. That's like the first real next-gen game we got. And it already was good enough to get runner-up for best graphics from me. And now it's time for the winner. And I think people may be surprised that both of us picked the same winner here. But the winner for best graphics for 2020 is Ghost of Tsushima. Matt and I both chose Ghost of Tsushima. I'll just say this, Matt.
When I know there's people that's like, oh my God, Matt didn't pick Demon's Souls, or neither of them picked Last of Us Part 2. Like, what did it? There is no other game this year that stopped me in my tracks repeatedly than this. This
was a hard category, though, Matt. I had The Last of Us Part 2 on there until like the very end. It is.
Nothing else made me stop and take screenshots like this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just stop in the game. Like every game, it's like, that's pretty, but you just keep running or you keep riding. In Ghost of Tsushima, I stopped and I just watched the grass sway and watched like these little wisps of like fog blow through like the, it's just.
Like, is it a technical achievement on the level of Last of Us Part 2? Probably not. But is it an art direction and use of color and use of environment triumph? Yep. Yes. This is Sucker Punch firing on all cylinders. Unreal. And just taking advantage of the HDR, taking advantage of the setting, taking advantage of just their expertise in using color, which they've always been really good at. And just random locations that aren't they're not
significant.
They're not places where cutscenes happen. They're not places but you just end up, it's like, oh my God, look at that view. Look at that vista. Look, I'm standing in this river and I have to stop and look because there's these trees that are reflecting in the river and I got to take a shot of that. Like I had something like 1.5 gigs of screenshots of this game by the time I was finished with it. And I never do that. I never stop and take shots.
Usually I take like 6 or 7 screenshots per game that I play. Yeah. And that's just for for me to put like on the game pages for us to use on the site and things like that. But this game, I just kept snapping and snapping.
I was taking pictures. I'd load them into my computer. I emailed them to people or text them to people like, look at this thing. And like people are getting tired of me. People are getting tired of me sending them pictures of my samurai game by the end of all that. It was just incredible. Like
it's the perfect meeting for that piece of hardware of the tech and artist. It just is. It was the first game I played when I got my LG CX OLED for a reason. I have it on disc. I went and dug out the disc and put it in my PS4 Pro just so that was the first game I could see with my new TV. It's just the perfect cross between technology and artistry, and it's hard to hit that.
It is one of the best syntheses of those two things in the history of the medium.
I'd agree. It's stunning. Everyone who sees it says it's stunning. My wife, I've never seen my wife's eyeballs pop like that looking at a video game. She just couldn't even believe it was real. So, yeah. Best graphics of 2020, Ghost of Tsushima. Congratulations, Sucker Punch.
Not just a technical category.
Nope.
You can't forget that.
Absolutely. Next up, most innovative, and we also have a runner-up and a winner for this. This category wasn't as easy this year. I'll just fully admit. It was not hard. It was not easy to find a lot of truly innovative products from.
Yeah, there wasn't a ton of innovation,
but that's okay. We still got great games. Matt, what's your runner-up for most innovative?
The runner-up is chosen with a little bit of whimsy, and it's Maneater.
Okay.
I appreciate it's not the first game where you play as a shark, but it is the one that commits to that idea the most. And
Matt, it's the only one that did not make me vomit.
There you go.
Jaws Unleashed.
Jaws Unleashed.
Played two shark games, and the other one was Jaws Unleashed. That literally made me vomit. So
yeah, this is the first shark PG.
Yeah.
Really delivered on that in a way I was not expecting. And like they took what is a fairly ridiculous concept and they made a pretty good game out of it. And like the further you go, like the more that you see all these things they're taking kind of, RPG, staples and adapting them to this sort of free swimming shark idea. And it mostly works. And I mean,
dude, it does work. And that's what makes it innovative. You're controlling a fish for like 30 hours and it's fun and it works. That is an achievement. And they even have next gen versions. Like if you have Xbox, you got a Series X version of this game for no extra charge. It's really crazy.
Like it's
so amazing. Many other guys couldn't do it, but somehow, man,
Cyberpunk didn't get that shit out, but Maneater did.
It's great. My runner-up is Fall Guys. For obvious reasons. The reason it isn't my winner is because we're going to see for the next several years, it's blah, 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 Battle Royale. It's XCOM Battle Royale. It's like Civ 6 Battle Royale. Like, I just think that we're going to see this stuff constantly. It's going to be whether the studios can actually make it work or not as to whether we actually see it. But I just think it's easy to come up with that concept of platformer Battle Royale. You can put
it's like Battle Royale meets Ninja Warrior is basically what we've got here.
They did a great job and they executed well on it. And so it deserves runner-up. And that's what it got. So, Matt, what is your winner?
My winner, going back to this one again, is Hades. And the main reason I pick it as innovative is because it takes a genre that I generally bounce right off of and can't really stand and turns it into something that I couldn't stop playing.
Yeah. I don't like that genre either. And I played this far longer.
Oh yeah. The way they took the roguelike ideas and kind of turned them into something that made narrative sense, which is almost impossible, and turned into something that was fun to play every time you went for another run. It's just a testament to how good those guys are. They are in some ways at the top of the indie game and I don't think it's even close in a couple of places.
There are some good studios out there.
There are some good studios, but in terms of just some like the voice acting work,
but they've earned it too. I mean, it's like their third, fourth game.
It's the fourth game, and it's also important to me to point out that they get better every time.
Everyone,
like they are learning and adapting.
I think some people might argue the Transistor was at least a sidestep.
Maybe I don't like Bastion or Transistor very much.
I like Bastion a lot, but
I want to, but something about Bastion leaves me cold, and Transistor I didn't particularly like, but I like what they were trying to do. I just didn't. It just didn't click with me. Pyre I liked a lot. I think I like Pyre enough that you were surprised by how much I
was surprised. It was a sports game.
Yeah. I don't know. What something about that game just spoke to. I think the world it takes place in like it
is very interesting and weird for sure.
And this game does similar things, but it does it with a genre that I almost never like. I mean, I guess you kind of could say the same thing about the sports genre in Pyre, but these guys have a way of figuring out a spin on things that normally don't grab me, that just capture me in a weird. It's fascinating to watch it happen to myself, and so that's why I give it to this, because it took this thing that I would normally never even try and turn it into something that I couldn't put down.
Okay, my winner for most innovative is a game that might be able to actually make Hades, and that is Dreams. I don't know if any of you guys have gone back, if you even bought Dreams. It doesn't seem like it sold that well. But if any of you have got it and you haven't booted it up, go back now and look at the creations that people have made. Talk about blowing your freaking mind. It is unreal what people have created in those tools. I don't think you could actually build Hades, but the fact that I'm actually wondering if you could just shows you why.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't bet against it.
Yes, I think you could maybe jimmy a couple things and get pretty darn close. So I wish it had sold better. It's really a shame that stuff like this doesn't sell better, because it discourages other people from doing it.
Well, I would think that most of the sales on this would be digital, so we wouldn't even know.
Yeah, I don't know, anecdotally, it just doesn't seem like... I haven't seen like anyone on my friends list playing it or anything like that. You know, all those little things that kind of add up to me thinking something is or isn't a certain way. My special sauce or whatever it is, I don't know. But whatever it is, me taking in information and then spitting it out, that is my analysis of what's been going on there. So I really enjoyed Dreams. And the best part about it to me was that it was also an enjoyable single player game on its own. And also it gave you the opportunity to kind of see what was possible inside the tools. The tools were way more user-friendly than they were before. It's basically drag and drop, copy and paste. They just made all their tools better and easier, more importantly, so that people could get the most out of them. And that is exactly what has happened with Dreams. Okay. It's time for the really big ones. Our most anticipated game of 2021. And Matt, this was hard. This is, I mean, these awards were easy, I'll be honest with you. This one was the hardest category, I think. This is the one I thought about for a really, really long time, because next gen's coming next year, man. Like it'll be full throat, not just this like, here's a launch, maybe kind of like it's coming. So
it's fun. This was the easiest, one of the easiest for me. There are no
lucky you.
There are no other games on the slate that I have are more interesting to me than these two. Okay. It was a little, and I guess actually it wasn't that hard to put them in order. I think about it because of the reputation of the previous one of the other one.
Okay, so what is your runner-up for most anticipated game of 2021?
My runner-up is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Because I think this is where, Miles Morales is amazing, but I think this is where we're really going to see the PS5 stretch its legs.
Next gen begins here. Like that should be the slogan for that game. Like that should be the subtitle. Ratchet and Clank, next gen begins here.
Yeah, that should be the slogan for Insomniac. That should be on the sign on the building, frankly.
Yeah. And that sign will last forever because they'll keep being new generations and it'll always make sense.
Yep.
At least I hope so. If Pactor's future doesn't happen anyway.
It's gonna take another weird major world event for that to happen, I think. So I think we're safe for now.
I agree with you, Matt. Like I'm really geeked up for this game. But there's so many good games scheduled for next year. It was the last game cut, I'll say that. My runner-up is Horizon Forbidden West. Obviously, Horizon Zero Dawn ended up selling like over 10 million copies for a new IP. It did huge for a reason. And what I really liked about Horizon is that, again, things that I generally gravitate to are games that try to do things a little bit differently than all the others. And this game certainly had tons of elements that you weren't seeing in a lot of other open world action RPGs. And just based upon what we've seen of the new game, it looks like it's going to continue. So I'm intrigued by the stuff that they've shown in the trailer because it looks like there might be like a like a paradigm shift in technology in the world. Like some of the gear and stuff that she's using looks like it doesn't quite fit into the first game. So I'm interested to see what they do with all that stuff. In all honesty, like what we've seen so far is ambiguous. We don't know. We don't have a lot of information about it, how it ties into the first game. A big part of it for me is just what they did with the first game. And I love it so much that I am willing not to give them a pass, but to just maybe give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. And now it's time, Matt, for you to pick your winner.
My winner is
game of 2021.
Just keep the B-roll rolling because it's Horizon Forbidden West.
His winner is Horizon Forbidden West.
Yes, because that was my.
I couldn't figure out how to transition, Matt. I was like, "What should I do?"
It's my game of the year. It's my game of the year for 2017. Of course, the follow-up is going to be my top thing.
Yep.
So everything you just said. Okay. I agree.
All right.
What else can you say?
Yeah.
Until we find more out.
We've also talked about that game, like the first game, how many times, and we just don't have any information on the sequel yet. So a lot of it is based on faith, but I feel like they've earned that faith.
For sure.
Next up, game of the year. Well, actually, before that, I get to pick my most anticipated in 2021. And I don't think anyone will be surprised by my pick, but I think I'm surprised that you didn't at least include it, and that's God of War.
God of War's not coming out next year.
It's right now. It's scheduled for 2021. That's all I can do, Matt, is take whatever date they give us and assume that's the date. I mean, I know that's not the case, but I mean, honestly, though, like I think the chances of it coming out next year are probably 30% or less, but it's scheduled for 2021. So I can't just assume, like, look, they may have been cranking on this thing and it may actually come out. So if it does come out, that is my most anticipated game. I've talked about why the God of War reboot has been my game of the whatever for a long time. A lot of personal reflection in relation to that game. Went through a really tough time when that game came out, and in some ways I think it really helped me. So, and on top of the fact that it's just freaking amazing. So, Sony Santa Monica, God of War, if it's 2021, definitely my most anticipated. No doubt about it.
I anticipate it will not come out in 2021.
I would say that too. Okay.
There's another one. There's another one you can have for free in the fantasy draft. There's not a chance in hell.
I'm definitely not picking that in a draft, man. That's not happening. I'm no fool, although maybe a little bit in fantasy drafts. And next up, as I just stupidly teased, game of the year is next. And this is also one where we have a runner-up and a winner. And the other problem, too, for the way we do these is by the time we get to the end of this list, we've talked about all these. That's why I was trying to curb you on Hades, because I was like, bro, you Hades wins like 2 more times. You need to leave some stuff to say, because at the end, you've run out of things to say about these games. But that's
okay, because by the end, we're also trying to get to the end of the
That's right, and that's exactly what we're doing right now. This is fun. I'm having a good time with this show. Game of the year. Runner-up, Matt. What is your runner-up for Game of the Year 2020?
Runner-up is Ghost of Tsushima.
I don't think anybody who has watched a single episode of Game Face is surprised by that at all. Yep.
This is the game that came along right at the right time, right in the kind of the first big hump of pandemic lockdown as well. Yep. And it was just was one of the few games this year that I've been able to really kind of lose myself in and not worry about anything else while I'm playing it. Increasingly, that is a thing that is hard to do in the situation we're in. And I love everything Sucker Punch has ever made to some degree or another. And this just continues the trend. I love running around the open world, doing random stuff. I love this. I like the story with all the side character stories. The main story was fine, but the stuff that really shined were the characters sagas, like for each of the side characters, it kind of fleshed out who they were.
Yep.
And I intend, as soon as I have some free time, I'm going to go back and play it again on PS5. Like it's gorgeous, as we already talked about.
The other thing I like about it, Matt, is you can also play this game however you want. Like I found this guy on YouTube who just plays it perfectly, and like he does stuff that I've never seen anyone do in the game. Like I don't even know how to explain it. Like the moves that he does to like block like incoming attacks, and then like his counters, like they're not even counters, and they just like slide in half and like fall over. Like, yeah, dude, this game is so awesome. Definitely worthy. I wouldn't even care if you would give it Game of the Year. I would have not fought you on that at all. Just a classy game. We need more of those games that you're not embarrassed if your wife or your girlfriend walks in while you're playing it. In fact, you might even be proud and try to get her to play it. So, Ghost of Tsushima, top shelf stuff. And you guys may be very surprised by my runner-up for Game of the Year. And it is Cyberpunk 2077. And I know you guys are like, what? The game's broken? What? So, as I've gotten older, when I used to do Game of the Year stuff, as I've said, when we had big editorial staffs and things like that, we'd get in a room and 15 of us would like fight it out or whatever. But when you don't have those people, you have to figure out a way to do it on your own and have it be true to how you feel and be effective. And what I have found for me personally is I look back on the games I played and then I try to think of the ones that stuck with me. The ones that when I finished playing for the night, it maybe was hard to go to sleep for a little bit. The ones where if I did play until late in the night, when I woke up, the first thing that I thought about in the morning was the game, stuff like that. And this game, Cyberpunk 2077, has done it to me. The characters, the city, which is a character all on its own, the world building, the RPG element, the systems that are running under the hood that are already working great, regardless of the bugs. I know it's weird and it can be tough to explain why it's my runner. I just think it's, even when it is finally the bugs are fixed, it might be the best game from 2020, to be perfectly honest with you. I know a lot of you guys are struggling to hear this right now because maybe you played an hour or you got the base PS4 version or you got the base Xbox One version and you've already returned it and it looked like a PlayStation. I get it. I've seen all the videos. I know CD Projekt Red screwed everybody and I think that sucks. And if you guys haven't figured out, I am not a fan of CD Projekt Red, but I just cannot deny what this game has done to me. I can't. The world feels like it's just soaked into me and I feel like I'm a part of it. And when I leave it, I want to go back to it. And when I'm not in it, I think about it. And I don't think no matter how many bugs there are in the game, that part of it anybody can deny. And I think once the bugs are worked out of it, everyone's going to have a much different opinion on Cyberpunk 2077. And with that, it's time for our Game of the Year. Matt, what is your Game of the Year for 2020? And we can say it together because it is The Last of Us Part 2. Yep. This easy. Mm-hmm. It's now look, I'll say this. If Cyberpunk had come out polished, it wins.
Yeah,
for me.
that would have been a competition. Sure.
Cyberpunk could have been almost as good as people thought it was going to be, but it's not. It's busted. The Last of Us Part 2.
There's a box quote. Almost as good as you thought it was going to be.
But it's not. It's busted. This game is the furthest thing from busted. It might be the most polished piece of software I have ever played. And I just cannot find a weakness in the game. Not one. If anything, it's like, okay, there's no multiplayer mode. But you know.
Which is apparently coming. So
I knew it is. Exactly. So it's just everything about it. It is just so clean. The story is so good. The performances are so awesome. The tech is so strong. It's Game of the Year 2020. I don't know how anyone can give it to anything else. I really don't.
Yeah, it was yet another second place fight.
Yeah, that's really what it is. Yep, absolutely. And look, I really like Cyberpunk 2077. I can totally understand where Ghost of Tsushima is your runner-up. Totally get it. So there you go. There's our Game of the Year for 2020. A big occasion. It's The Last of Us Part 2. But now it's time for our Generation Awards. We have just 2 more awards left. First of all, thank you guys for sticking around for this whole stream. We're coming up on a 4-hour stream at this point, and you guys are still flooding the chat with comments. It's amazing. Thank you for staying with us this whole time. Awesome. But I'll be honest with you, I would expect nothing less from you guys because y'all are the best. All right, here we go. Generation Awards. These are as big as they get. These are bigger than Game of the Year. This is Matt and I looking back across the last 7 years and picking the best game and the best platform from the last 7 years. And we do have runner-ups for both of these as well. And we're going to start things off with the game of the generation. Matt, what is your runner-up?
My runner-up is the one that only I picked, I'm pretty sure, across the entire industry, and that is No Man's Sky.
Yeah. I totally, anyway, again, anyone who has watched Game Face will not be surprised by that at all.
No. This is, I already liked it when it launched in the condition it was in. It has only gotten better. Hello Games has supported this thing with the force of 1,000 developers at this point. Like it's ridiculous how hard Hello Games has gone into listening to the community and improving the game and adding more things and coming up with new ideas and making it. It's much like Warframe. If you only played this thing back when it came out or looked at it when it came out, it is not that game anymore. For entirely for good reasons. It is like playing something else. And I have played this game across all 3 platforms over 1,000 hours. My biggest one being PS4. Like the PS4 save is up to 500 hours now. But and this is one of those games like you kind of described Fall Guys as like, if I have just a little bit of time, I'll jump in, I'll go pick up the stuff from my mining colonies, I'll go out and explore a couple planets, like clear out a solar system, jump to the next warp out to the next unexplored system, land on the space station, get out, quit the game. I played for like 20 minutes, I'm done for the day. But I always come back to this game over and over and over, even 4 years later. But
that's the way it is designed.
Yeah.
Is that you don't get tired of it. If you like it, you're going to like it forever.
Yep. You never run out. That's for sure. There's always another place to look at. And it's even more interesting now that they've changed up how the planets get used and how the environments work. Like you can find real interesting places to look at and creatures to see. And they just continue to add more and more things. The next gen upgrade even improved it more on PS5. It just keeps going and they're not done yet. So I will always advocate for this game and continually go back to it. It's great.
Okay. My runner-up, and actually maybe we should just do this as a joint announcement, Matt. My runner-up is the same as Matt's winner, and Matt, I'll just let you announce it.
Which is not going to surprise anybody that it is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
Yep. It's my runner-up and Matt's Game of the Generation.
Yeah. This is another
both
one.
Our Game of the Year from 2017.
Yeah, 2015.
2015. Sorry. Yeah.
This is it was still pretty great in 2017.
Yes. It actually may have been better in 2017.
Yeah, by the time they patched everything, got all the DLC out, it was great.
That's what I'm saying.
And this is another one of those, just one of those games that, how you've talked about Cyberpunk today pretty much describes how I feel about this game. Like it pulls me in. I am part of that world. I just want to know more. I want to see more. I want to
meet more people,
do more things, kill more weird creatures, find out what kind of weird spins on, one of the things I love about the CD Projekt Witcher take is that they take, and it goes back to the books as well, but like they take kind of, known fairy tales and legends and they kind of have these weird, darker twists on them, which are often more accurate to the original legends and fairy tales, like before they got sanitized for a child audience. And I love that they take that and go back to things like that. It's very compelling to me. I love Geralt as a character. I hope one day I feel the same way about the Cyberpunk experience. I feel like it's there if they can polish it to that point.
I think they will.
And I played this game to 100% completion.
They can't give up on it.
I played this game to 100% completion 3 separate times on 3 different platforms. The last time I didn't even mean to. I just booted it up to see how it looked on the Xbox One X, and all of a sudden it was 80 hours later. And that is just a game that it brings me back over and over again in the same way that Mass Effect did last generation, and there's just no comparison. Obviously, I played No Man's Sky more, but this is a more curated and more focused and polished experience, and it has to get my generation more. No question.
All right. My game of the generation is, and I don't think this will surprise anybody either, it is God of War. I've talked ad nauseum about what it is about this game that really resonates with me. Personal experiences that happened when the game came out. I have not been a huge RPG gamer my whole life. So some people come to action RPG from the action or from the RPG side and then move towards action. I came from the action side and moved towards RPG. And so God of War was the perfect mix for me. It was just slightly tilted a little bit more towards action than RPG stuff, and that's exactly what I want. Story was great. The scale of the game was amazing. I'm hoping the new game will be an open world game instead of kind of this pseudo open world, but I wouldn't even be disappointed if they did that again because it works so well. So it just, again, just like The Last of Us Part 2, it's just a complete package. And for me, it was very emotional and that endeared the game to me on a level that few other games ever have. And I know, hopefully, I never go through something like that again in my life. And so I don't know if another game will ever kind of imprint on me again the way that God of War did, because let's face it, that's what happened. And I love that game, and it is my game of the generation.
If there's another reinvention, reboot, I don't know what you'd call it, of a franchise that's better than this, I can't think of it right now.
Well, definitely not. But I think maybe someday we'll see one. But I don't think there's another one that's really close, to be honest with you.
Especially in terms of something that reinvented the wheel so hard into something different and still managed to capture so much of what made the original good and also went beyond it
also,
to be better.
That was so successful. I mean, it's not like God of War stopped selling like a lot of franchises and they're like, oh, we need to reboot it now because people don't like it anymore. They rebooted it because they're like, we need to reboot this freaking thing.
Yeah, we're bored. Let's make this something different.
That's what the good studios do, Matt. Those
they don't rest
guys,
on it.
They're not. That's not good enough. It's just not. So there you go. God of War, my game of the generation. Next up, platform of the generation. This is some heavy hitter stuff right here. So this is where we basically pick the best platform from the last 7 years. And that includes PC, Switch, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4. Now, again, just like our yearly award for best platform, it's not just like which one can create the most polygons. That's just a part of it. Hardware, power, software, services, all of it is taken into account. And in this case, we're taking it into account over the last 7 years. Now I'll say this one was hard for me too. And I think you can see by our runners up maybe where my conflict was. Matt, what is your runner up for platform of the generation?
My runner up is maybe a little surprising for someone who has such a powerful PC, but I went with Xbox One.
Yeah, I was surprised by this.
Not because of the overall, I think Xbox One started pretty weak, but once I got an Xbox One X in the house, I have played the majority of multi-platform stuff on that system for the last 3.5 years. And which I did not expect. I basically got the Xbox One X because I wanted a 4K Blu-ray player. I did not expect to have it become suddenly such a major factor in my daily gaming life. Because the Xbox One had been a non-factor for a couple of years by that point. I basically played everything on PS4 and PS4 Pro, and if I didn't play it on that, I played it on PC. But the Xbox One X changed things around to the point that holding the Xbox One controller is more natural to me than almost anything else right now.
Yeah, I hear you. I love Xbox controllers.
So in the end, looking back on kind of the generation, and maybe tilting it a little harder toward the second half of the generation, but the Xbox One X has really helped define how I've played games for the last several years. And that doesn't mean I won't abandon the fuck out of it if the stuff runs better on PlayStation 5. But in terms of this generation, like Xbox One X finished real strong and made a strong impression.
And you use it as your third-party console at the end.
Pretty much, yeah. I play everything that isn't exclusive to PlayStation pretty much goes on the Xbox One X, or did. Now, who knows what the next gen holds, but and it's also prevented me from having to spend the money to build a new gaming PC. So I appreciate that too, because the current PC kind of does what I need to do for indie and more general stuff. And the Xbox One X plays the AAA stuff just fine for me.
Yep. This was really hard for me, but I honestly didn't even consider Xbox One as a runner-up because all I ever had was the base Xbox One. Yeah. And that thing was a piece of crap, man.
It is. It's terrible.
Not only is the hardware way underpowered, like the power button eventually stops working. My launch unit that I got, the thing just started turning on its own. They send me a replacement. A year later, it starts doing the same thing.
Well, I mean, don't forget.
And the hardware isn't everything, but
don't forget, I had the day one edition of Xbox One and the controller broke and I sent it.
And then it all exploded.
They sent it back and it was basically a time bomb. Like it was, if I hadn't touched it with my foot, it would have exploded on the couch. So big turnaround between 2013 and 2017 there.
Yeah. And so I never got like the One X. So I just had that base one, and so I never played any third-party games on it, and there were no good first-party games.
The One X makes all the difference. Before I got the One X, I don't think I turned on my vanilla Xbox One in a year.
Why would you?
There's no reason for it.
So anyway, that was just kind of disqualified for me. So what it came down for me was PC and Nintendo Switch. And it was really hard to decide because to me, PC has made a huge move in the last like 5 or 6 years. I mean, just think about it. PlayStation exclusives are now being released for PC. So are Xbox exclusives. So why do you buy the consoles, right? Well, and so it's tough. It came down between PC and Switch for me, but the Switch, because it is something different, Nintendo was brave and decided to not just follow. And actually, Pactor does a great job talking about this stuff in the latest Pactor Factor, which is like, what will Nintendo do to counter PS5 and Xbox Series X? And I'm not going to ruin what he says, but he does a really good job of explaining why the Switch has become a phenomenon and why essentially what other people are doing will never really affect Nintendo because it has found the blue ocean and it has managed to stay in it and keep swimming in it. And just the fact that I had a console that I could plug in, and I know, Matt, I know you don't care about this. I do. I like it. I like being able to play it as a console or as a handheld. Now, I do play it probably 90% of the time as a console, but when I do go on trips, I like to be able to take it with me and play really good games on the go. So then you start looking at the software library. I mean, Nintendo has knocked it out of the park with the Switch. We've never had all these franchises in this quantity, at this quality, at this early in a Nintendo console's life cycle. So Nintendo has just knocked it out of the park. When Nintendo does that, it's really hard for me to give the nod to PC over Nintendo. So my runner-up for platform of the generation is the Nintendo Switch. So much stuff I played on there, I can only play on there. So my runner-up. And now it's time for the winner, for the platform of the generation. And again, we picked the same thing, and it is PlayStation 4.
Yeah. I mean, looking at our games of the generation, it's kind of, obviously mine are not exclusive.
I mean, just look at the last, our rundown right now. Just look at the last, 8 categories and look at how many of them, even Dreams, how many of them were dominated by place. It's just this way from day one.
Yeah, and you can talk, it's like, okay, 2 PlayStation exclusives have been put on PC. I'm going to need to see a lot more than that before I don't think PlayStation is useful as a console because I'll, even if I never play another non-exclusive game on PlayStation 5, I will want to own that PlayStation 5. Same for Nintendo systems. I'm fine owning Nintendo systems so I can play Nintendo's games and nothing else, because they're worth playing to me. That's worth it to me to have a method of playing those games. And PlayStation would be that without it. And even then, for a lot of the generation, PlayStation was useful for multi-platform games as well, because it was way ahead of the Xbox One when launch happened, and you were getting better versions there, which is a big turnaround from the previous generation, which I think is a testament to Sony's ability to listen and roll with the punches.
PlayStation 4, tape-to-tape winner.
Yeah.
It led out of the gate, and it led until the end. Nobody caught them. They just dominated.
And it doesn't look like that's changing.
And it looks like we may be getting a complete repeat again, because back when I called for Phil Spencer's head, if they had actually done something when I called for Phil Spencer's head, they'd be good right now, Matt. If they had bought all those studios back when I was railing on Phil, they'd be good. They'd be 3 years out from when they bought the studios, and all the games would be rolling in just in time for this generation. That's why I was so hard on him. I'm like, bro, you're letting your chance to win next gen slip away. And he did, and we're seeing it already. So PlayStation 4, kudos to Sony, man. They, as you said, they turned it around. PlayStation 3, even though a lot of people will say, oh, they didn't end up winning. They got their asses kicked. They just sold their console longer than Microsoft did. This was not the case. There was no coming back for Microsoft this time. Sony put its foot down and just kept the accelerator down for basically 7 years straight, which ultimately led into a very successful launch of the PlayStation 5. So there you go. Our platform of the generation PlayStation 4. And we do have one more fun category before we go. I was the EIC of game trailers. I still love video game trailers a lot. And so every year when we do our Game of the Year awards, I do go out and I try to find my favorite game trailer for the year. And this year, the winner is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart debut trailer. And the reason it wins is because it's the most next-gen thing my eyes have still ever seen. And not only that, it mixes everything. It has cinematics. It sets up the plot. It shows you a new character that's going to be in the game. And then it just shows you this chunk of face-melting gameplay. It's awesome. Great trailer. Nothing got me as excited for next gen as that trailer. Still, when I watch it, I get excited. Like, I can't wait to play it. So just what it does for me is it just reminds me so much good stuff is to come, people. Like, I know it's easy to look at a console launch, and we all do it. We're like, what is it? No, it's launch. Wait 2 years. When they're right into the metal on these machines, we are going to get some amazing games. I cannot wait. And I cannot wait as well to get back in 2021 to hang out with you folks. It has been a crazy year. I'm not going to sit here and wrap up the whole year. I think I'm going to do that on Ask Shane Anything. In fact, we'll be asking for new questions for that here in the next day or so. And also don't forget, I mentioned in Game Face that we're giving away 10 free t-shirts. If you've lost your job and you're a Sifted subscriber and you want a shirt, just DM me on Sifted at Shane and we'll get you a free shirt courtesy of Sifter Suicide King. But I don't want to sit here and rehash the whole year. I do want to thank all the people who have helped us, Matt, Jared, for Game Face in the studio. And then we have Vincent, who's helping out with all this other stuff. And he's living in like the Midwest. And then we have Mitch, who rolled out here and helped us for a while. And all you guys who are just pledging on our Patreon or on our old subscription system, or you're just donating or whatever you're doing, you're just sharing the show on social media. We appreciate all of it. I am shocked. When this year started and COVID hit, I really thought it was going to be the end of Sifted. I'll be honest with you. I was like, how is this going to happen? All of our people are going to lose their jobs and I'm going to lose my job because I can't blame them. It's like you lose your job, it's priorities. You got to eat. You got to pay your rent. I was like, of course, the first thing you're going to cut is Sifted. And somehow, some way, we made it this year, all because of you. All those little bits and pieces coming together to make a whole. So anything that you do to help us, again, if I tweet out, hey, here's the new episode of Game Face on YouTube for free now, and you like it or retweet it, retweets preferred. But if you do that, thank you. It all makes a difference. Like if you don't have any money, just share our stuff. It makes a difference for us. So I hope you guys have had a great year, just experiencing this insane launch year mixed in with COVID. Man, we just stuck it out together. Like somehow it was like, I don't know. For me, a lot of ways, Sifted was just like a refuge. It was a place I could go where I could forget about a lot of the insanity that was going on and just really enjoy something I really love. It was a nice escape. And you guys were all a part of that, being there, the great community we have there, all the great discussions we've had. I mean, I could just go on and on. And if you want a New Year's resolution and you're one of our patrons, your New Year's resolution should be to spend more time on sifted.net and less time at patreon.com. Because as you can see, our community isn't at Patreon. It's at sifted.net. And our community is awesome. They're all older. They're adults. They're mature. They don't act like idiots. And honestly, looking around the internet, that's hard to find these days. So that's what I would hope in 2021 from our patrons. Come over to the site, link your accounts, become a part of the community. We're all just like you. And I want everyone unified. As I always say, unity is our force. There's nothing stronger than unity. So let's unite in 2021. I look forward to having a great year with all you guys, with Matt, with Jared, with Vincent. We're looking at launching a really cool show in the early part of 2021 that I'm not going to spoil yet. Got lots of stuff going on, and we're really excited about it. So thanks to everyone, the people who are giving the bits and everything right now in our chat, and even just stuck around for this whole freaking stream. It's like 4 hours and 15 minutes at this point. You guys are awesome. So thank you very much for everything. Thanks to everyone who helped Sifted in any way. We love you guys, and we'll see you next year.